This is the Godzilla Masterclass. We're really going to break down the entire Hollywood visual effects pipeline and recreate it in a different way, not copying, but taking the biggest lessons and figuring out the best way for the rest of us to actually make these big budget ideas at home. And the big takeaway I want every single one of you to have leaving this masterclass is how you can make your own films without these massive Hollywood budgets and all of the shortcuts we can take without sacrificing on the quality and eventually actually becoming better filmmakers. So I just wanted to shout out one really cool thing. I saw this after our last Dune masterclass, and I just wanted to share this to show that it's very cool to me to see that these techniques do work. People were able to take these same creative techniques that I've been trying to teach in these live classes and apply them in their own work and create better environments, better films, better visual effects. So yeah, there's nothing stopping any one of you, and I'm trying to give my best stuff away. So if you haven't, if I can recommend one thing, we all showed up, we're all here. I'll try to get through this as fast as possible and deliver on all the biggest lessons I learned. But for you to get the most out of this, honestly, what will help you the most is to put that evil cell phone away in the other room and just get out a pen and paper and just write this down. I've included some really cool frameworks, some of the best lessons, and try to tie them into easy to use frameworks that you can replicate on your own projects. So I want you to get the most out of it, and I think genuinely it'll come from actually taking notes and writing some of this stuff down. But today, the big topic is Unreal Engine 5, and to me, why I love it is because it gets rid of all the roadblocks that come with old school visual effects. You have an unlimited polygon count. You can make as big a scenes, as complicated of scenes as you possibly want without sacrificing on the quality, and you can run these gigantic scenes on really simple computer hardware. You don't need the top of the line stuff. I literally ran most of this, my first experiments, all from a laptop, and more recently went over into desktop. But you can make animated films, they can be stylized, you can make your own freelance projects from home. I've seen lots of people are like authors and musicians, and they want to make music videos, or they want to make cinematics of their own worlds they're building. And there's so many cool films being made in Unreal right now. This is a great one from Sava Sivkovic called The Radiation, and it's also used on Love, Death, and Robots. It's used to animate these big budget films and TV shows that you'll find on Netflix. It's not just a hobbyist tool. This is actually used, and it's why I came into Unreal is because you can use it on set in virtual production. I think most of you probably heard of it around the making of The Mandalorian and working on these LED volumes. That's what I've been doing the last 2 years here. Is trying to, trial by fire, figure out how to use Unreal Engine in every single context here. Because with real-time rendering, it just speeds up the entire process so fast. You're not waiting around for anything. But yeah, let me know, how many projects have you guys made in Unreal? It's gonna help me know. I'll know where to focus and where I can, skip past some stuff and maybe spend some more time depending on where you're at. So if it's 0, just let me know. There's no shame in it. Some of us are gonna be starting from 0. We all started there at one point. Or maybe it's 10 or 15. We'll check in the chat here. Seeing Stelios, it's at 0. Totally cool. Andre Sativa have 1. 1 from Nithya, cool. Lots at 0 and 1. So honestly, this is cool because we're gonna go from idea, just as simple filmmakers, and we have these big, sometimes they're simple stories, but they're big ideas, and we're going to approach how can we break down something as complex as a Godzilla short film, something that seems like it's only possible at big visual effects studios, and make it and break down that entire workflow so you can start approaching these types of films yourself at home. So seeing lots of people starting out at the beginning. Also Joseph, seeing you're starting at 6, that's really cool. Well, that's great. I'm glad I asked because that's definitely we'll be able to focus in on what matters for a lot of you that are just starting out in Unreal and why it's such an awesome tool. Well, cool. So without further ado, we're gonna break down what we're actually going to make here. These are the first 5 shots I have finished of this Godzilla short. So I'll let it roll here, and this is what we're going to spend the rest of this masterclass breaking down and showing you how to make the same thing. All right, so that is the short film. That's what we're going to be breaking down and sharing all the secrets to replicate some of these Hollywood visual effects techniques yourself. But just so you know, we don't have to follow the traditional route that's been laid out before us. I'm sure everyone gets told like, oh, you need to learn Houdini or Maya or all these different things. The reality is anyone can start working on Hollywood level visual effects. Anyone can make their own films. And I want to help you do the same thing because I think I've learned a decent amount throughout the years. So if you haven't heard of me before, my name is Josh Tunin. I spent the last 8 years working in Hollywood visual effects, mostly as a compositor and compositing supervisor on movies like Star Wars 9, Dungeons & Dragons, and even Godzilla vs. Kong. That was my very first show as a lead compositor, and I started out in love with Godzilla. It was one of those groundbreaking visual effects films that I showed up at midnight on Thursday to see it with everyone else, and was just super excited to see what was possible. And that night, I honestly, a flip switched in my head where I was like, okay, I've been distracted. Now is the time. Like, I've seen it up close and seeing these awesome movies brought to life. It just made me fall in love with cinema all over again. And now, thankfully, 8 years later, I've gone from someone who was just at home with these big dreams to working on Hollywood visual effects, working on set for shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender. And yeah, been on set with a couple different shows over at Pixamundo, have built some environments for virtual production, have built short films entirely in Unreal using motion capture, and basically every combination of tools out there. I've tried to do it myself before I teach anything, and I want to help you do the same thing because most people think they kind of put all these restrictions on themselves. They think in order to make or in order to be in the visual effects industry, you have to live in LA or New York, you have to already have industry connections or have a college degree. But I'm just telling you, it's completely not true. And the only reason I know that is because I grew up in Wisconsin in a super small town of 7,000 people. I didn't know anyone. No one in my family was in the industry. I had to figure all this out myself. And most of that was by being self-taught right here on YouTube. And honestly, one of the most inspiring things to me about Godzilla 2014 is the director, Gareth Edwards. He was a self-taught visual effects artist and filmmaker turned director, and all of his films he was making by himself with really small teams, really small crews, and doing all of the visual effects himself as a completely self-taught artist, just like you and me, searching up all this stuff on YouTube and figuring out a lot of it yourself once you're actually applying it to your own projects. And obviously he's gone on to make some incredible films like Rogue One and The Creator more recently. But I found this really cool clip of his first. It was actually a course I took of Gareth Edwards' After Effects course before he ever directed Godzilla. So I pulled this up. I was digging through to see if I could find it, and I totally could.
My name is Gareth Edwards, and
So let's
I'm
check that
a
out.
director and visual effects artist. I recently created a film for the BBC called Attila the Hun, which featured 260 visual effects shots in high definition that I created all from my bedroom on my own. And in this course, I'm going to show you exactly how I did it. Basically, you'll get a chance to have an overview of my approach to create visual effects shots that you're probably more likely to see in a feature film, but instead done very quickly, very cheaply on a TV budget.
So pretty cool. So he started out just like you and me, making visual effects from his bedroom. And I always thought after seeing that, I was like, dude, if he can do this, why can't I? Why can't the rest of us? Like, honestly, there's nothing stopping us. And that's why back in 2016, I was able to pack my bags, fly out to Canada, and get my start in the industry. And if there's one specific lesson I want to share with all of you, is that you do not need a degree or some certification or anything like that to start working in the industry. All you need is a demo reel. You need a portfolio of work that sets yourself ahead of every other artist. And if you can do that, you can work on any team in the world. And that's what I really want to focus in on today, because I think the next generation of filmmakers is not coming through the studio system. I think it genuinely is coming from YouTube, from the self-taught artists, from indie filmmakers making the most out of their budgets. Instead of getting 50 million bucks to make a film, it's the people that can make the most out of these small budgets. And that's what I'm obsessed with. So so that's what's led me all the way through Godzilla and working on that film and wanting to pass on some of the lessons I learned from that film specifically. So I hope I made all the mistakes so you don't have to. Without further ado, we'll break down how you can start making your own films without knowing how to code, without knowing how to model or how to animate. You do not need these $1 million budgets. All you need is Unreal Engine 5. So let's jump right into it. And I honestly believe anyone can learn this. It's completely free, and everyone on this call right now, if you don't already have it, download it, and you'll be able to follow along and apply some of these lessons. So these are the chapters we're going to break into today. How to go from idea to final film, how to go from previs all the way to a finished film. It can be a very large gap, but I want to make that really simple and easy and give you a step-by-step framework to go from idea to previs to animation to final film. I'm super excited about this one. I don't see a lot of that on YouTube. It's the actual filmmaking workflow. I will also cover the shortcuts to build cinematic environments faster and easier than ever. All of the ways to save yourself time without sacrificing quality. And I had to cut a lot of corners to make this city in a really limited amount of time, and I'll show you exactly how we're going to do that. And then lastly, we'll also cover the step that 90% of visual effects artists skip over, and this is how to upgrade your renders and hit that Hollywood visual effects level quality with your Unreal renders. And it's some tricks that I learned and used as a compositor on feature films. I'm going to give all of these crazy techniques I learned. I'll try to really break it down into 3 easy to follow techniques that I honestly use on every shot I'm making to this very day. Whether I'm at a visual effects studio or I'm at home, I use these in every single shot, and I'm going to break down exactly how that goes. So to start things off, I feel like a lot of people hear about Unreal and they start making environments. And there's so many tutorials out there for environments. They're great. It's very cool to see what you can make in Unreal. But movies are they're not just the environment or the location. You don't have a movie without characters. So let's start with the characters and break down how we got the crowds, how we got Godzilla, how we got the planes and the helicopters, all of that. Let's start there so that we have our characters and we can start actually assembling a real film with performance. So let's start with Godzilla. So this is the model in context. These are from the final shots. And it's probably not a surprise to a lot of you. I did not literally create this from scratch, model it, texture it, all those things, because in reality, when you're making films, as a solo visual effects artist or someone working with small teams, I think a lot of people think they need to do every single step themselves, and this can make the entire process be very slow. So I went onto turbosquid.com. It's a site for 3D models. They had a really great one. This is the first one. If you type in Godzilla on TurboSquid, if any of you want to actually do this yourself, just go over there. It's literally the first result. And it came textured, it came rigged, and it was still low poly enough where I could bring this into Unreal and we're not gonna lose quality, but it's not, billions of polygons and these super high resolution models that are just hard to work with. Like usually the more geometry you have in your scene, the harder it is to work with. So this was still easy to work with, but it looked great up close. And this was enough to get started. It had the rig so that we could already start using that to animate things. But something you need to know for those of you new to Unreal is that if you want to animate inside of Unreal Engine, which is what we did on this process, you need something called a control rig. So this is something built inside of Unreal Engine. They're making some really great tools to make this process super easy in Unreal 5.4, so that you can click and drag these rigs onto characters. But essentially, it just allows us to manipulate our characters inside of Unreal Engine. So we just have one control for each bone in our rig, and we're able to start posing our characters and start animating them. Now, again, this is something that I normally would do, but a lot of times, if you think of what it's like to work on a real film set, it's not one person doing everything. It's a whole team of people. It's collaborators, and it's people, you're finding people with different strengths, and you're all giving your best, doing what you do the best, so that everyone makes up for each other's weaknesses. And this is something I did literally the morning I was going to go into production on this idea. I was like, oh, it'd be so fun to make a Godzilla film. Let's just do it. Like, nothing's holding me back. On LinkedIn, I actually came across a rigging artist called Sanal Deep. And it sounds super simple. I just sent him a DM and said, hey, are you interested in doing this? Here's some work I've done. This is what we're going to try to do. Just a 1-minute action scene. Does that sound fun? And he was super into it, loved the idea, and was willing to work out. And to work out with me on the project. And it sounds like a simple thing, but I'm telling you, so many people know that you can do this, but no one actually reaches out across the aisle or through the internet to actually talk to other artists so that they can make these better projects together. So if they're, again, it's so simple. Everyone knows this on the surface, but when is the last time you personally have reached out and worked with someone through the internet? It's actually really easy with Unreal, especially with animation or modeling or characters. A lot of people want to work on these fun personal projects. So, they'll go the extra mile, and, you get to work together to make something really cool. So that's what we did for the control rig on this. Sanal was able to put that together in just a single day there. But the big thing we need to know is that if you want to animate anything in Unreal, it all happens inside of Sequencer. So maybe some of you have used like After Effects or Premiere or any other time, like if you just think of a timeline with keyframes inside of it where you're animating things, Sequencer is our timeline for everything you want to animate inside of Unreal. So this is where we're going to put every single property. So if we look at a shot like this, Godzilla is going to be in Sequencer, and the helicopters are going to be in Sequencer. Everything that we're animating is in Sequencer. So even beyond that, the lights themselves, we're going to put them into Sequencer, and we're going to animate them brighter when that explosion happens. And then we're going to add in the muzzle flashes and the muzzle tracers and the lights shooting from the helicopter. Everything that we're animating, big or small, even animating some different clouds of dust in the background. But the most obvious things are obviously the vehicles and Godzilla here. But yeah, it can be your particle effects. It's everything that you're going to animate and move throughout your scene. Your camera as well. A lot of people forget this. You want to animate your camera, even if it's just moving in really simply. It's moving in, it's moving back. You don't want to zoom your lens. You want to actually push your camera through your 3D scene, and it's really going to make your shots start to come alive. But yeah, everything that you're animating, it all gets done inside of Sequencer. So we'll go through how we made the previs on this whole project. I think we're going to save that for later. I think we want to show the coolest parts of Unreal, and then we'll show how we can actually make this step by step. But yeah, so Jonathan Abenhaim actually helped out on the animation of this. So I made the previs all myself inside of Sequencer, posing Godzilla and making a series of shots, making a short film all inside of Unreal, and then we can go into Sequencer and we can start manipulating our character, animating the rig. And also Jonathan was someone who I reached out. He has his own channel, Watch Me Animate. Would definitely go check that out as well. But yeah, I just reached out to him to see if he was interested. He didn't know how to use Unreal. He had never used it for cinematics or making animated films in Unreal. But again, he was able to learn that in just a single day. We hopped on a call, jumped onto a call for like 2 hours and just got him up to speed on how we can work with these rigs. But very, very quickly, we can start animating and doing everything live inside of Unreal. And again, so we'll get to that previous stuff later. I'm super excited about it. We'll get into the filmmaking process. But I'm sure some of you are thinking, does that mean that we have to be animating characters? I'm sure some of you you're not experts in character animation, just like I would not say I'm an expert on character animation either. It's still something that constantly learning and trying to improve on. So do you need to know animation to get started? And the answer is no. There are other ways to utilize character animation really, really simply. And some of these techniques I use on every project, but I specifically use to bring the crowd to life. So we have the actual humans in our story running away from Godzilla down the city streets, and we can do this in really simple ways. We don't need to literally animate a walk cycle and become a character animator just to make our first film. So I got these characters from an online model pack from Big, Medium, Small. But the technique I'm about to show you here, you can use on any characters that you find, any 3D models. If they look like a human, you can follow along with this process. They could be a soldier, they could be a person on the street, they could be a samurai or a villain or any type of character. You can end up using the same process. So we're starting with a 3D model. And by the way, all of this stuff, I'm basically just going between Blender and Unreal. So Blender is also free. Unreal is also free to use. So I'm just going between these two softwares for everything you're going to see for the remainder of the class here. But yeah, so how I approach this, you can have these 3D models without a rig and without any animations. And using this process, you'll get a rig for free and you'll get a bunch of animations that you can drag and drop into your scene completely for free. And it's all using Mixamo.com. Now again, some of you might know this if you're in the 3D space. Some of you, if you're brand new, you might not. But I think even for those of you that know that this tool is out there, this is one of the most underrated tools to start bringing films to life. If you want to make films, your images have to move, the characters have to move, the environment has to move. It can't just be 3D models posed still all by themselves in the background. You need to have people running, screaming, shrieking if we're going to do a Godzilla film, and that's exactly what we can do by using Mixamo.com. So all you do is you take your 3D model, and again, this could be from any website, it could be something you make, it could be something from TurboSquid or any other website out there, and all you have to do is upload it into Mixamo.com. And then you'll export it as an FBX. We import this, and again, we don't need a rig. Actually, this works the best if your character doesn't have a rig. So I actually deleted the rig off this character. I uploaded it into Mixamo.com, was able to set up this rig super quickly. And then what this allows me to do, once this has been rigged and set up, is that now I can pick through existing animation libraries, and I could type in running and find someone like running away. There's these injured runs that we were able to use. I'm downloading all of these in place because it makes it easier to work with in Unreal. We have him like turning around, we have him falling over. And again, we're just trying to find what are the different variations we could have, because what we're trying to do here is we're going to try to build an entire crowd, not just one character running through. So once we have that, we'll have our character, we can import him into Unreal. And once you get those, you basically get animation files from Mixamo that you can then bring into Unreal. And then from there, we can start to combine all those clips that we just pulled. We can start to combine them together inside of Unreal. So Unreal is great to take existing animations and start combining them together to create like these long choreography of them running and turning and looking behind and spinning around and falling. All these things we can do by simply bringing in these characters. Literally, we just drag and drop our character into Sequencer. We can see Sequencer here on the bottom left. We're dragging our character in, we're pressing on this plus icon, and we're gonna add in our animation track. So these are all those animations we pulled from Mixamo.com. So we have this hit side on the body, we have him running and looking back, and we can literally just click that in there, and just like that, we have this first version of the performance in our scene. And obviously this is with Godzilla in here. We've done the stomps, we've done simple animation for Godzilla. Honestly, in here, the more complicated thing would be trying to animate 20 other people running away in fear. So we have him, we place that first animation, but obviously once that animation is over, that was only about 50 frames of animation there, and our entire shot is a couple seconds long, so it's much longer. So we need to combine several animations together so that we can actually assemble this crowd. So all you have to do, it's super simple. You just keep adding in more clips back to back to back. So all these clips loop, so if you just drag out one edge, it'll keep looping forever. So I have this run animation that I'm just gonna drag out to the end. And then I'm going to animate the position of our character. So as soon as he starts running, he literally starts to translate through the entire 3D scene. So he's literally running away and towards the camera. And again, 2 animation clips. That's all we're doing, like nothing crazy here. But by doing them, by assembling them together in the right way, we can add in our first character, and now we have a little bit of a performance. And once you have one of these characters set up, it's really easy to start turning this into a crowd. Right now, obviously, is pretty simple with just our one guy. But again, what is a crowd? It's just the same thing duplicated over and over and over again. So we're gonna take our main character here, the one that's kind of running through the foreground, just gonna click on him and duplicate him into a second clip here. And if you click on this bar, it's a little hard to see here, but we have our, right above the animation track, we can literally press this click and drag on this gray bar and drag it to the left and offset our animation here. So literally I'm just, I'll play this back one more time so you really catch this. It's the same clip, I'm just offsetting it further. So now our character in front is already started in a dead sprint, and just by offsetting the animation earlier and later, you can start to get a lot more variation without spending a lot of time. So that's not gonna work for everything, but we'll start to offset things, drag them left and right, and then you can even create an additive transform track. Another thing to write down if you're taking notes here, literally you just add an offset. We're gonna say, hey, just move over 100, or let's say 2 meters to the left. And that's all we're doing here. Let's say he's gonna move 2 meters to the left, and then we're gonna move him back closer to Godzilla. And then we start to get this variation. We have different versions of him, left and right. We can continue to change out the different animations. So we have a couple other animations here of him falling and getting left behind and rifling around on the ground. So yeah, we have these stumble animations, so we can drag and drop these in and start to change that performance. And again, just find the most interesting animations here. And again, it's all live in the scene, so it's easy enough to just rotate around. And now he's falling back and away instead of getting clobbered by Godzilla's foot. So he just dodges out of the way. And very quickly, by assembling these couple things together, we're actually starting to tell the story of this crowd running for their life away from Godzilla when, just a few minutes ago, we had absolutely nothing except for a 3D model of a character. So this is the entire process. It's just laying in these animation clips. The one thing I'm doing here is I'm motion blending two animations together. So basically it'll say where one animation stopped, let's start this animation exactly at the same position of where it ended up. So if we have a character running forward, we want to make sure that the next animation starts with our character already running ahead. So if you want to link multiple animations together, use the motion blending options. Just right click your animation and motion blend them together. But that's really it. It's not a very complicated system. It's just most people aren't spending enough time with it, or honestly, I think the power of it really does come when you're adding in multiple characters, especially far into the background. If you're ever making a city, if you're ever making a sci-fi city or a photoreal one, you're going to have hundreds of people on a single city street. So adding in those little subtleties, those variations between the animations, that's when your scenes will really start to come alive, and you won't be able to, it's those small things, but that animation is honestly one of the most important parts. And this is the way to do it without ever having to keyframe anything yourself. So that is the crowd pipeline. And then from there, basically what's so cool about Mixamo is we can actually swap out the character models after the fact. So if you see here, we can go from this dude in this sweatshirt and into a variation of the model with his suit. And the way we're doing this is we're just uploading different characters into Mixamo. But because Mixamo has the same exact rig, that means the animation can be applied to any rig. So basically we could import a male character and a female character, or multiple variations. So we have this man, and then we have him in a suit, and then we have an old man version, and they're all using the same exact animations. So it makes it really, really easy to just worry about collecting 5 to 10 really great animations. We're going to rig all our characters inside of Mixamo, and then in Unreal, you can just swap out that character, what they call a skeletal mesh. That's the Unreal term for characters, is just a skeletal mesh. You can simply swap out that 3D model, and if it uses the same rig and has the same animations, it literally is a one-for-one swap. And then very, very quickly, we went from having one guy doing one animation to about 10 doing subtle variations in different animations the entire time. And by doing that and adding more and more together, I think by the end I added about 20 different characters into this crowd to make the whole thing work together. But honestly, the more you add, the less any one character starts to stand out. And very quickly, you can have this pretty complex scene of all these different people running at different speeds, at different intensities, all coming together to create that, create this terrified look of this whole city running away from Godzilla. Is that cool? Is that something that at least you can start using on your own films? The big takeaway here is use Mixamo, use it to rig your characters, get animations for all of them, and then it's really easy to duplicate and offset those animations throughout your timeline. That's the quick version of how to add crowds into your scenes. But there's an even easier way. If that seems a little intimidating, that's characters. Characters are what you need to tell stories. But again, for someone who's completely new, it can be a little intimidating. So if you just want to add a lot more life or create an action scene inside of Unreal, and you just want to start out for your first project, I would totally recommend not starting with characters per se or humans, but starting with vehicles. I find that these are much easier to start animating with, and you can tell really interesting stories and create action scenes using vehicles. So that's exactly what we did with these planes in this sequence here. So we have our vehicles running through the scene. I built a really simple blueprint so that I could have this plane just follow along with this spline. So that way I just have to worry about the flight path itself and not worry about the actual animation with keyframes. So that's the whole setup. If you want to steal it, go for it. Pause that and go back to it later. But yeah, otherwise, you don't even need to build anything fancy. Literally, most vehicle animation can happen using 2 keyframes. Like, that really is as simple as it needs to be. It's just by setting an in and out point, and then it's adding in some roll animation to your plane. And you'd be surprised how far you could take this and really run with it. Most planes aren't doing crazy loop-de-loops and doing spirals and all that stuff. Usually, if in action, they're doing simple arcs, like going from here to there, or going straight and twisting around and doing barrel rolls. We don't need to do very fancy choreography. But anyway, again, you're just taking that plane, you're adding it into sequencer, and you're creating a keyframe between 2 points. So we're saying start here and keep animating over there. And once you have started with your vehicle animation, the way to go from a vehicle animation into a film is by adding in a camera. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So a really cool trick that I love to do, I used it all over the place in this short, is take that camera and attach it or parent it to your plane. And by doing this, you don't have to worry about your framing going crazy or anything like that. You can make sure that your plane is always in the right spot. It has a great composition as you're making that final image, but then you only have to worry about animating the plane itself and not like animating the plane shooting through the scene and then the camera shooting through the scene at the same time. Some other cool things you can do when you parent that camera to your plane is that you can create some really cool over the shoulder or looking out the window shots. Almost, this was done with GoPros for a very long time, but it's the same exact idea. Just like a GoPro, we're attaching our camera to our plane, and all of a sudden we can get these really personal shots because we're basically making a shot that's from a pilot's point of view when we're attaching a camera to a plane just like this. Again, very simple technique, but you can do a lot of great stuff with this. Same if you're making a chase scene with cars, taking a camera, mounting it or attaching it or parenting it, we're all the same thing here, right? By just parenting it to your vehicle, you can make some really cool, high octane, intense animation, but you're just worrying about the animation of the vehicle itself. You don't have to worry so much about the camera. This is another example too, is depending on your vehicle model, you can also animate the cockpit. So you can have characters in a cockpit without animating faces and without animating dialogue. Again, we're just trying to look for what are some of those shortcuts to give us the most bang for buck for our time. And again, just animating small things like dials, if you rig these in another software and import them into Unreal, basically you can manipulate any bone, any part of your rig, you can fully animate that inside of Sequencer. So for this, we just literally took off these, for the speedometers and these different gauges and dials, we literally just made a really simple triangle model that we could then spin around and use as our speedometer and our different gauges here, as you can see. And then we could start to animate in the cockpit itself. And again, we're going from external, looking at plane's attack, to being with characters inside the cockpit. It makes that story a little bit more personal, and it lets us change up the type of shots that we're able to make if you can also be working inside the cockpit itself. Another example of this, similar but different, is doing the same thing but inside of a helicopter. So just like it would be in real life, we're putting a camera inside a helicopter, parenting it to this helicopter here, and just flying it right next to Godzilla. And by just parenting everything together like Lego bricks connecting to one another, we're able to make something like a pretty fun animation with a very simple setup. We just have this helicopter with 2 keyframes going from here to there, a simple translation between with our helicopter just going forward. And yeah, by putting that camera inside that helicopter, we can make a really cool shot with a really interesting point of view without taking a ton of time to start animating characters and everything completely from scratch. But yeah, is that cool? Does that at least give you a couple ideas for some simple ways to take your animations to the next level? That's a really quick primer on vehicle animation and both character animation. But I'm telling you that Mixamo tip, I repeated a little bit, I've kind of brought it into a couple different videos, and I don't know if people really take me seriously when I'm saying this is one of those huge cheat codes that I use in every single shot I do, especially when there's crowds and when there's humans. It's gonna save you a ton of time, and I've made entire previs animations just using those Mixamo animations and nothing else, not animating a single thing except for those Mixamo animations. So that's vehicle and character animations. So that's how we can at least approach animating characters inside of Unreal without being a character animator ourselves. Is that cool? All right, well, let's go over into making environments. So step 1, we have our characters. Step 2 is building our environments. And then step 3 is gonna be creating our film. So once we have our characters or our actors, we now need to build our film set. And in this case, we need an entire city that we can go anywhere and start to destroy it and also make it look good on camera. And then after that, we need to start making films with all of our assets, not just looking at them, but actually telling a story with a camera. So let's jump into how to build cinematic environments with Unreal. So a lot of these techniques are things that I learned by experimenting back on Godzilla versus Kong and then trying to apply them into Unreal Engine. So these are some of my shots from Godzilla versus Kong as I was trying to figure out how do you make these complicated cities look perfectly real while also, obviously this is a little bit more stylized than making something perfectly photoreal. But back in the day and even now, and basically on every project that I'm ever working on, you always have to start from reference. You need to find images, photographs on the internet, and start to compare what you think something looks like with what it actually looks like in real life. So before I jumped into this happened back in the day on Godzilla vs. Kong, and I did the same process again now, is I want to find real photographs of people capturing the environment I'm trying to make at the same time of day. So I want someone who's there at night, and you can see it's this foggy city. There's these crazy neon lights everywhere that they start glowing out into this foggy city. We have these red billboards and blue billboards, and there's this really strong purple light actually being cast onto the buildings themselves. And from here, we can actually start to break down what's making up these images. We can also see, if we look up close, that there's a ton of office buildings that make up all of these buildings. It's not just glass and concrete. There's an interior of all these different these cubicles and office buildings and apartments that are all gonna appear in like a massive city where there's hundreds of rooms inside of one giant skyscraper. So that's another thing that's gonna be pretty complex, but we need to figure out how to approach it. And before we'll jump into some really cool techniques, some of the best that I've learned throughout my years at visual effects studios. But a quick thing too that really, when I was first on Alien Covenant, that was my first major film project that I was on back in the day, and it was really cool when you start out at a visual effects studio. One of the coolest parts to me, as someone who started completely self-taught, was the fact that you can basically open up any single shot or any project, any file in the entire movie. So you could open up the very best shots on your specific project and see exactly how those artists created that look and see exactly what nodes they used. And then you could copy those and bring them into your own. For me, I was a compositor, so I could take their node setup, I could copy it into my own work and start to see like, okay, how do they do this? How could I apply this to my own work? But I found that by doing that, just copying the nodes wasn't good enough. There was something different. I could use the same exact tools, the same exact nodes specifically that they're using, but my work didn't look as good as some of those senior artists. So what I realized through that process was that ultimately, the biggest difference between a senior level artist and a junior level artist, like I was when I was starting out, was that seniors literally see the world differently. They see things that you don't see. They have a better creative eye. And the way they build that is through repetition. It's by analyzing these photographs, looking at some of the best movies out there, looking at some of the best photographs out there, and then constantly comparing it to their own work, like pixel by pixel to see what is different. And by doing that over and over and over again, that's how you start to develop a better creative eye. And very quickly, you'll start to get your own bag of tricks of things that you can start applying to every shot. So one of the first things that I could copy the nodes, but I was missing entirely in my journey was actually was adding depth into my shots. Now, depth is not a very intriguing word, but it's the thing that makes your shots look absolutely huge. Before I even get to that, one thing that's really cool here is I would encourage you, as you're trying to pull in reference, as you're trying to find things in real life or just photographs from real life places, I would also encourage you, when you have the opportunity, go out and capture your own reference. So I live in Montreal. I just went down to Chinatown and grabbed an iPhone and actually took photos and videos of city streets in the exact conditions I was trying to create. So in a case like this, we were able to see all the different things we need in real life. There's these office buildings, there's the street lamps. We can see that the street itself is a lot more yellow, and as we go higher up, it's a lot more blue. We can get this really interesting looking light on the office buildings themselves. They're kind of going pretty stylized here. They're actually hiding a bunch of green spotlights towards the bottom of these buildings to hide all this green light. But again, we want to see what are people doing in real life and how can we recreate that in our own work. So from here, that's where I had to start building this set. Once I had my references, once I kind of saw what we're trying to make, then it was time to start building this. So I gave myself a bit of a head start on this project in particular. I ended up using an asset pack from bigmediumsmall.com. You can check that out. I think it's in the description if you want to check that out. But basically the idea here is, instead of spending all that time to model every single part of this kit by hand, which for the people that made this, definitely took them a very long time. It's very detailed. They spent their time really wisely. And the models themselves look really great here. If I wanted to do all this on my own, it would definitely add an extra week or two or even more onto this project. But again, this is just like working with other people, like with other freelancers or other people you can find on LinkedIn or YouTube or anywhere. Even Discord is great for that too. Is just find existing assets out there. Another great resource for this, for some of you looking for places to find great assets, my other favorite spot to look is artstation.com. I think that's definitely, there's an ArtStation marketplace, and that's probably the best value for getting really high quality, highly detailed models for not a whole lot of money. That's a really great resource that I would definitely check out. If you've never been on there before, definitely check it out after this. You'll find some really great environments and terrains and things that you can add into your environments. But yeah, so that was the Tokyo back, they have a Tokyo pack. There's a specific name around that, but the Tokyo back alleys pack, I think it is. These had the buildings and they had the characters, but it didn't have an entire city. We just had about 6 buildings here. So very quickly, this was cool at first, but when we had to build several buildings, I was getting a little worried of how can we do this without, blowing this out of proportion and literally modeling 50 buildings, because we can't do that. I just don't have the time to literally model 50 buildings for an entire city. But I grabbed a second pack from Kitbash 3D. Now, these don't always look good up close, but they look great in the background. But yeah, usually the textures don't always hold up close, so you usually have to take those and modify them a little bit further. I'll show you how to do that right here. But this is another great resource if you just want a holistic, a full pack made with the same point of view. This is the Neo Shanghai pack that we could just drag and drop into our city. So this is a great way to get started, is now we can take these two together, we can assemble them in a 3D scene. But I find most people, when they're in Unreal, or some of you might just be in Blender or other 3D softwares primarily, I think a big mistake a lot of people make is that they think they need to build a 3D model for every single object in their scene. But I want to share a small trick that we use all the time on Hollywood Visual Effects, and that I used on these Godzilla shots, is that instead of creating a 3D model for everything, if you're making complex scenes, you can add in matte paintings or just take photographs and images from the outside world and just place those in your Unreal scenes. So let's take a look at this in action. So instead of building all of these individual buildings one by one by one, What if we just took this actual same photograph and placed it in our Unreal scene? It's way faster, it's way quicker, and we know that this already looks photoreal. So that's why using this technique is really great, is just find great photographs and start placing them in your Unreal scenes. So that's exactly what I did here. I just took a single image and I turned it into an unlit shader, which means it won't accept light. It'll basically look exactly like the image does when you're just looking at it on your computer. If you change your material to unlit mode, it makes it so that you can just drag and drop it anywhere in the scene. And very quickly, I can start to move this behind some of our key buildings. And the idea here is not to make every building with this DMP, not to have our entire city be built with photographs, but it's to place enough photographs in the background so we can start to place, 5 to 10 buildings in our background instead of 50 or 100. So we're gonna start basically going back and forth between trying to find the right place for that photograph, placing a couple buildings in front of it, readjusting that photograph, and kind of combining the two together until we have the right shot. So here you can see that I'm adding in that building, I'm moving that DMP, that matte painting or that photograph in the background, and I'm just trying to find the right composition through the camera itself. So that's a key thing here is you really want to be looking through your final animated camera when you're placing DMP. But this is a really great way to quickly add in a lot of complexity without spending a lot of time. The next problem here is adding in office buildings. So if you look on screen left here, you can see all of these really bright office buildings, and you'll notice some of these office buildings are the brightest thing in this scene. And the reason why is, especially if we're on the ground looking up at these skyscrapers, a lot of times you're literally looking up directly at the lights, like the ceiling lights in these office buildings. So a lot of times there are these fluorescent tube lights or whatever there is inside of an office building. But we need to be staring at really bright light sources inside of these buildings. They're not like gray boxes. If you really look at real life, they're the brightest things in this entire scene. Like you can see how white and blown out those office buildings are on the screen right side of the image here, or screen left, sorry. So instead of building all of these office buildings by scratch, instead of modeling every single one of these, another really cool tool inside of Unreal are something called decals. Now, an easy way to think about decals are like stickers. They're things that you literally just slap on top of other objects, and you can apply any image or any texture onto that 3D model. So a classic example of this is for bullet holes. So instead of if you're making a game and you have characters that shoot at a wall, you need a bullet hole to be at the penetration point of every single bullet that was shot by a character. So they're not like throwing in models or textures, they're just placing a decal, they're stamping it on top, and now we have this texture that looks real because it's based on real images and we've spent the time to make sure it looks great, but we don't need to texture that in the object itself. We can slap it on top at any time. So using this really basic idea of decals, we can actually do the same thing with these office buildings. So I'm just taking images of office buildings here that have real lights and real light sources, like there's different tube lights and different lamps, all different things like that inside of these images. And then I'm turning them into decals that I can just slap on top of these buildings. So you can see here, I can drag and drop these and maneuver them around these office buildings to give the appearance that there are these interiors inside of all of these buildings. But I don't have to texture a single thing. I can modify them as I'm working on my shot. And we have a lot of creative control if we create these as decals. We can push them further into the building, we can stretch them, we can squash them, we can rotate them, we can manipulate them just like any object or any image you would inside of Photoshop. Except they're a 3D object that's in our scene that we can move around and use to change up our 3D scene and basically create all of these interiors. This is a really cool technique, and it's how I added all these office buildings across this entire city. So without this, it'd be a pretty boring shot, but with this, we have all these tiny glowing lights throughout all of these different buildings. And now we can also change the position of them with these different buildings. So it can hide some of that repetition that we might have because we're not using a ton of models. We're just using a few here, as you can see. And then once you finish a building and once you put decals all over one building, you can literally duplicate them and just drag them onto another building and then offset their location, move them up and down, rotate them even further. But yeah, it's a really simple technique, but using decals is super awesome. It's one of my favorite things. Again, super underrated. And I don't think a lot of people know that you can use them to add lights and emissive detail into your 3D scenes. Is that cool? That really helped make this whole process a lot faster. So I just needed, I think it's a total of 8 different building models, different skyscrapers, different buildings themselves. But by taking these emissive decals, I can add a lot of randomization to each of these buildings and make them look a lot different than you'd see at the surface. So that gets us really far, but I want to share one of the biggest techniques I learned, one of the coolest things I took away from Godzilla versus Kong. It was a technique I was developing as I was trying to understand how can we make these like these super foggy cities. They look super interesting, they look cinematic, you get all of this depth from fog in your scene, but how can you art direct that and how can you control all of this fog? Because typically, fog is something that takes a super long time to render out of traditional 3D softwares. If you render fog out of Blender or Maya or any of the other packages out there, fog usually is the thing that takes the most amount of time. So on Godzilla vs. Kong, I was trying to figure out how can I make my own fog after I've already placed the lights, and how can I use it to make my shot look better instead of it taking way more time for me to get a final result. So through that process, I developed this idea, which are just called glow cards. They're basically these really soft colors of light that have this nice soft fall off. And literally they're just orange, yellow, and blue cards that we're basically using to replicate the idea of fog. So I'm placing a bunch of orange and yellow ones towards the bottom of the screen here to add in that city light from underneath, also fire lights from underneath. And then we can take these same soft cards and place them around our neon lights, around the red signs that we have in the background. We can also just add them around yellow lights being cast from the apartments themselves. I also added lots of blue ones out there just to hide and add depth between the different buildings. But very, very quickly, we could add in a lot more color and depth across our entire environment. And this is super, super simple. And again, these are just literally images of a single color just blurred out. So it's a really, really soft, blurry image. And we're just using this, and by having a depth fade node in our material, we can start to spread this 3D card throughout multiple objects. And that's what gives us that volumetric feel, where it's spreading throughout the depth of our scene. And I actually use these to create some explosions. So again, if it's hard to understand what the glow card is, again, it's just a really soft color. It's just an image that is being applied onto a plane that we're stretching out and pushing through depth using a depth fade node in the material. And by doing that, we can take that material, we can bring it into Sequencer, and just like we learned before with Sequencer, we can animate any property in our scene. So we can animate materials inside of Sequencer too. So we could make it brighter inside of Sequencer, which is what I did here, where when we're having this explosion cue on as soon as Godzilla stomps onto the ground, all we're doing is creating 3 keyframes to make that explosion and that glow card brighter on impact, and then to get darker as it fades out after the explosion has happened. So it's a really simple technique, but again, you can start placing these anywhere in your scene, and you can really start to add lots of color and depth throughout your scene. That's what gives that orange glow behind our characters, and that's what really starts to submerge our different characters and make this look photoreal, because we have real fog being cast out into our scene, but we're able to art direct it and move everything around all in real time using glow cards. So is that cool? That was a huge technique, and I'll even go back to, I think it might be helpful to go back to that Godzilla versus Kong reel as well, just so you can start to see, look at this city image here where we have all these different pockets of blue fog here and red fog coming from the signs themselves, and this yellow fog being cast off this yellow building. We basically want to take that same idea and enhance it, push it further, because ultimately we get to create whatever we want now that we're in Unreal. We don't have to just try to match only what happens in real life, but we can use these glow cards to make it feel grounded in real life, but really start to push our image aesthetically, make it look a lot cleaner, more cinematic, and use it to add depth into our shots. Does that sound cool? Hopefully that gave you some really cool ideas and things that will help you build environments faster. I just want to go through how we could build those environments and yeah, use those to build bigger, better, more interesting environments the next time you're building them in Unreal. So now we have characters, now we have environments, but we don't have a film yet. We just have a bunch of assets in our Unreal scene. And again, if you showed up here, it's probably because you want to make films on some level. I feel like all of us are filmmakers at heart, but you know, a lot of times filmmaking can be really expensive. It requires lots of people. It requires lots of gear. You need all these different, you need practical lights, you need rentals, you need to get a nice camera, you need batteries, you need lenses, you need all these things. You need locations, you need actors, you need meals for everyone that showed up. You need all these things. So how do we actually get better as filmmakers all by ourselves? We do that by making films from home. And I think there's no better tool to do that than Unreal Engine, where we can just start from a really simple idea and start to develop it further and further and actually make a finished film without leaving Unreal. So that's what we're going to talk about next. And basically what we're going to do here is we're going to, because I'm still learning this too. I'm just sharing what I'm finding as I'm learning it, as I'm finding the next best practices that are working for me. And what helped me the most on this project was actually going back and looking at how Pixar makes their own movies. So usually people jump right into animating their film. They have Godzilla in their scene, or they have their characters, they have their vehicles, and they start animating right away. But I'm telling you, this is a huge beginner trap if your goal is to make films. If you want to make films, we have to make a film, a sequence, before we work on a single visual effects shot. And this is something really important here. It's a nuanced conversation, but it makes a huge difference. And this is honestly the difference between making a film in a week and making a film over 3 to 6 months, is because a lot of people worry about finishing their movie before they've made a good film in the first place. So what am I getting at here? So this is the difference between visual effects and filmmaking. It's the difference between shots and sequences. The idea here is that we don't want to be creating visual effects. We don't want to be lighting our effects before we have an edited timeline. And what I mean by a timeline here is that films are sequences, and films are, whoops, I thought I had a different slide here. Specifically, what do I mean by films are sequences? Films are visuals and sound. It's pictures and sound together. It's not one or the other. You need both. And what I find a lot of people do is they just create a couple visual effects shots in a row. They'll create 3 or 4 shots. And then as soon as they add those into an editing timeline, they don't cut together. They're not telling a story, and they haven't really made a great film. They've just made good visual effects. And that's great if you're just building a portfolio, but if you're trying to make your own films and your own sequences, your own music videos, or anything like that, or you need to make freelance work for a client and you need to tell their story, then you need to create this in the right order. So how do we do that? We do that by creating the sequence first, by creating a story reel. Now, this is a term from Pixar. They use the term story reel. Another term for this would just be a storyboard, which is something you're probably more familiar with. But the difference here is a storyboard can look more like a comic strip. This is what you might consider a storyboard, but this isn't necessarily a story reel. The difference between a storyboard and a story reel is that a reel is a cinematic sequence. It is multiple images back to back to back, played out in real time like a video or a movie. So I actually have one of them I'm going to share with you here to just show you exactly how this works. Because again, it's a subtle thing, but the way Pixar makes their movies is they will spend 2 to 3 years making sure that this story reel looks great before they start on the visual effects. That's how important this is. Because yeah, the goal is not to make a comic strip, it's to tell a movie and create our own sequence. So I'll actually, let's pull this up. I'll mute myself and we'll watch through this story reel from Toy Story 3 so we can start to see what we're talking about, where we actually are telling this entire sequence. We have voiceover, we have music, we have sound effects, we have all these things together, and we're roughing out our movie for the first time. This is us on pen and paper making a first draft of our movie before we're going to spend, you know, a full 8-hour workday per shot to make it look awesome and amazing. So we got to make a great sequence first. So to give you some context before we play this clip, this is from Toy Story 3. The big hook in Toy Story 3 is that Andy is going off to college. He no longer wants his toys. And then I believe his mom decides to donate these toys, or anyway, there's some finagling there, but instead of going off with Andy to college, they go off to a daycare where they think it's going to be better. There's more kids, more people to play with them, but then this is their first time entering a daycare where they get a rude awakening where everything is not as it seems. So let's jump over to this.
They're here! They're finally here! Ah, I'm gonna be played with! Rex?
New toys.
That is an excerpt from the screenwriter of Toy Story 3 himself sharing their process of how they wrote the entire movie. It's actually over on his YouTube channel. The guy's name is Michael Arndt. Definitely check it out. Arndt, I think is how you spell his last name. But definitely check that out. He has like 30,000 views on this video, and it's one of the craziest, most in-depth screenwriting breakdowns ever. One to check out for you filmmaking folks later. But the big takeaway here is that we need to create the video and sound before the visual effects. That's what they're doing in these story reels, is they're figuring out the sequence. They're figuring, like, with all the different gags that they're playing out. They have Barbie getting smudged in blue paint and painting the walls with her. They have, the kids stomping on top of the aliens, and you get the pacing of the music, you get the pacing of the scene, of the sound, of the comedy, of everything. And especially with those Pixar movies, there's so much about family, and they're also really funny movies, and you want to figure out all the jokes and see if they work at the earliest stage possible. So the way they actually create films and story reels at Pixar, they write scripts, but no one reads scripts at Pixar. How they actually present their work for the first time is they actually have the screenwriter and the storyboard department, the story department, come together and create these reels to see if they work as a film first and foremost. Obviously, the screenwriter goes down and has to think about it first, but they don't show that script to anyone. They only want to see the movie. So what can we learn from this, and how can we apply this to our own films? So the way we can do this is by creating our own storyboards and our own story reels, but we don't need to draw anything by hand. We can just screenshot our Unreal viewport and use that to create a film first. And by screenshotting, this becomes a really, really fast process, but we can become filmmakers first, and then we'll worry about the animation and the environments and all that stuff later. So a big takeaway I had early on as I was kicking off this project is I'm just going to take screenshots. I'm going to take these screenshots into Premiere. I'm going to add them all together. I'm going to add in a soundtrack. I'm going to add in sound effects to kind of feel out the pacing of this whole scene. And when I was doing that process, I learned that you can just pose your characters. You don't have to animate them at this early stage. So let's take a look at this example here. If we look at this as the opening shot for Godzilla versus this as that opening shot for Godzilla, just in the pose without animating a single frame, if I look at this in a storyboard, they have a completely different feeling. And that's sort of the point here, is that we can tell a story with a single image first, while it's easy to keep it simple for ourselves early on, and then we can animate it as we get going. So this is my framework for creating storyboards in Unreal, is first screenshot your viewport, add those screenshots into a timeline. I use Premiere, but whatever editing software you use literally does not matter. Editing timelines are generally fairly basic. So we just need to add those shots into a timeline. Could be Resolve, could be Sony Vegas, could be anything. Then from there, you're going to start to assemble. You're going to add in music and sound effects, and you're also going to add in clips and stills from other movies. If you're seeing any gaps in your movie and you're like, oh, it'd be cool. Yeah, we need a kind of like a wide shot from something like from, Star Wars Empire Strikes Back. Maybe you have a specific reference of like, oh yeah, or like the way they do those wide shots in Lord of the Rings. That might be what you need, is this wide establisher for the movie you're trying to make. Well, just for this early stage, as you're roughing out your story and you're making sure your sequence works, feel free to just use images from movies. We're just trying to get the idea of what we're trying to make. It's the first draft. It's the first version of our sequence. And then we can start going into Unreal, screenshotting it, filling in the rest of our sequence with our own shots as we're going. And then you just continue to edit and repeat. You keep refining this. And this is not something where you take a bunch of screenshots once, you put them in a timeline, and you're done. This is a process where you go through, you create screenshots, you try stuff out, you see what works, you see what doesn't. We get our shot, reverse shot. We have, and I'm kind of imagining what's going on here. Obviously, this is early work, and we're trying to just understand. And honestly, it is trying to like be a kid again. It's trying to think creatively, look through the images and try to connect the dots and make your own film with these really rough, blocked out screenshots. But even with these screenshots, we're able to string together our own action scenes. So this was that first draft where it was just screenshots themselves before I added in any music or anything like that. But already we had a start, we had compositions, we have a beginning, middle, and end. They're not great, but at least we have something and we can see what the gaps are at this early stage. So one thing I realized is we don't have a main character other than Godzilla, and Godzilla isn't really a main character, at least in like 2014. Godzilla is kind of like a destruction movie. It's like Twister or Independence Day, and Godzilla is the aliens. He's almost the villain. So we don't really have a main protagonist. So we kind of need a protagonist of some sort, even if it's small. And we just want to tell this perspective. We want to tell the story through the perspective of a human, not just through a third-party outside observer documentary style. We want to be on the ground with Godzilla, with the people, and trying to think of like the scariest thing possible of a Godzilla attack. Like, what's the worst situation? To me, it would probably be being on the street with Godzilla 20 feet behind me and me having to haul ass to get away before he crushes us all. So I think it would be super cool to tell the story from that point of view, have some of those shots in our sequence, and that was something I realized I don't have any of that in our sequence yet. So let's go back and add that into our sequence. So now let's put the camera on the ground. Let's be looking up at Godzilla, and we could start creating some new shots from there. So this is how I first came up with that composition of that we used for that crowd shot earlier on. It starts super basic. It starts with one character and Godzilla and a basic layout. But again, you can start to understand what the story we're trying to tell is just from this single screenshot. So we want to create a new camera in Unreal for every single angle. That's the way I approach this too. This is a bit more tactical for those of you folks who are in Unreal already. A specific hotkey that I made. You can actually make your own hotkeys inside of Unreal, which is pretty cool. If you type just camera into your editor preferences, you can create a hotkey that creates a new camera from wherever you are in, like wherever you're looking at inside of your viewport. It'll just create a camera from where you are. So a quick example of that here is literally we just are lining up our camera. I'm pressing Control Shift Alt C. And then all of a sudden it creates that new camera inside of Sequencer for us. And basically what that allows us to do is it saves that camera position to a file. So we can go back later, look through that camera, continue to tweak the animation and develop it into a visual effects shot. But we want to start with a basic screenshot, start simple and start building on top. Once we have our music and sound effects, then we'll go back to animation. But that's the big takeaway here is to assemble your story reel and start to edit your film before you make the visual effects. And then from there, it's really easy to plus these up and start to animate your cameras and start to animate your characters inside of there once you've locked down that edit, once you get comfortable with the rest of your film. So literally, you can take your rig that's now in Sequencer, you can start to add in extra tracks and extra animation and quickly export this. So rendering in Unreal is super, super fast. It's real-time rendering, which means you just press a button and you'll get your render back in pretty much no time at all. Like this one took less than 30 seconds to render out. And just like that, we can literally drop it into our editing timeline, like I'm doing here in Premiere, and we can start to see, okay, is that better? Is that worse? Is this hitting the note? Do I need to keep tweaking it? But we are actually creating our film in the editing software. And basically the way I'm working with this is that I have Unreal open and I have Premiere open, and I'm just constantly bouncing back and forth between the two until I'm happy with that story reel where the visuals work, the sound works, the sound effects are all there, and then we're ready to kick it back into visual effects mode and start to add in the animation and lighting and all the cool stuff that we talked about earlier. Does that make sense? Does that click and at least give you a clear roadmap for the filmmaking process inside of Unreal? I hope that helps. And yeah, I figured it would be great to just share this first previs that I made. And again, it's never fun to show your work in progress work. So, take it easy, but this is that first previs, and this is the film that we're putting together now. And we'll give you a sneak peek at this at the previs level and give you another example of what a story reel looks like so you know what you should be making at that first stage inside of Unreal. So let's share this and take a look. All right, so that is the previs. Hopefully that gives you a much clearer insight, and that really is me trying to pull back the curtain and just show you what this process looks like, because it's not perfect. That previs is not perfect, but I think it starts to block in and give you a feeling of pace, of intensity, and you can see that the music swings and moves in, and we're creating these certain moments throughout that really small piece. And if you're just trying to do this by animating everything inside of Unreal first, that all of that sound design and the storytelling you get from the pacing and the rhythm of your sequence, it becomes an afterthought versus being the first thing you're thinking about. So I would highly encourage all of you, start with the music, start with screenshots, do that first, because it makes everything so much easier later on. But yeah, does that give you at least a really concrete roadmap for how to create your first storyboard or your first story reel? I hope that, I haven't seen a lot of stuff out there on the internet, period, about this part of previs and storyboarding and things inside of Unreal. And it's something that Like, honestly, this seems to be the entire part. Like I said earlier, Pixar spends 2 to 3 years figuring this out, they're making 90-minute films, right? So it's a little bit different. But they are figuring out the entire process on paper fast and quickly. And then it makes their time of actually creating the film, creating the animations and visual effects happen in less than a year, which is pretty impressive for some of those really gigantic movies. But yeah, it's just a really organic way to actually make films. And then once your edit is locked, you're totally set to add in all those extra details. So we got our last chapter here. Thanks for sticking around. We got this, honestly though, I will say is probably my favorite chapter because like I said earlier, I was a feature film compositor on Hollywood visual effects. And if you don't know what compositing is, I think the easiest way, the most simplest definition I can give you is that compositing is just Photoshop, but for video. And instead of working on one image or one frame, we're working on 24 frames per second. So we're working with video, but we're doing all the same things you would do in Photoshop. We're assembling multiple layers together. We're adding in lens effects. We're making it look like a photograph. We're making photorealistic visual effects here. So we're adding all the imperfections from a photograph, from a camera lens, from a camera itself. And there's lots of things we can do in this stage known as compositing. And compositing is this step that 90% of artists completely skip over, and it hurts their renders. And basically what compositing did for this Godzilla short is it's the rain, it's the breath from Godzilla, it's the sparks and explosions below his feet. It's that last 10% that starts to make your shot look like it comes from a Hollywood film instead of looking like it's just a video game. And if you skip over the step, chances are your work is going to suffer. It's going to have that video game look. It might look like a really good PS4 game, but that might not be what you're going for. So I'm going to go over some tactics and some ideas that you can start applying right after this to take your shots to that level and basically steal some of my Hollywood visual effects secrets and those techniques I use at a real visual effects studio and apply them to your Unreal renders. And all of this starts fundamentally, the biggest thing I use compositing for is to add stock footage, real life footage into your Unreal renders. I think, again, going back to those matte paintings, when we're adding in real photographs into our Unreal renders, if you're going for photorealism, photoreal renders, things that look true to life, then you need to be using actual photographs and photography, which is just footage as well, stock footage, in any way possible. You don't want your entire scene to be completely synthetic and completely CGI. You want to have something that was created or captured in real life. And to me, I always go back to stock footage as the way to do that. So if you want to apply any of these, this is a super easy process. You can export your camera from Sequencer. Just right click on your camera and export it. And then I'm just rendering out 2 additional passes here to do all of this compositing work later. So I'm just going into my deferred rendering tab and I'm enabling my depth pass and my position pass. And that's it. And again, if you need to go back to this to see exactly what I press, you can do that later. Don't worry about it. We'll show you what you can do with these cool techniques, and then you can go back and do it yourself later. But yeah, so you want to export your camera, and then you want a depth and a position pass out of Unreal. And what this allows us to do is it will let us add in all of these cool stock elements, but we'll be able to submerge them in the real 3D space. So instead of just taking a clip and literally playing it on top, we can take this footage of sparks and place it inside of our 3D scene because we have our 3D camera and we have our depth pass. So this goes by really quick, so let's break down what we're seeing here. First is we're gonna take our footage, right here we have our footage of sparks, we're placing it 30,000 units into depth. That's what this image plane node is doing. I'm using an image plane node. It just takes our 2D footage, it places it on a 3D plane in our 3D world, and then now we can look at that through the camera move, and the end result makes it look like we have this perfectly tracked in to the right spot in real life. And then by manipulating our depth pass, we can basically say, hey, everything in the foreground, everything that's at 20,000 units here, I want this to be black. and everything that's further away, I want that to be white. And when we take a pass like this and we simply just multiply it against our sparks, look what happens here, is literally our sparks just stay where the white is and they disappear where the black is. So what happens is these sparks start to look like they're behind this building and they're intersecting with Godzilla here. And all of a sudden we can take this stock footage and place it in our real 3D scenes. And it doesn't have to stop with just sparks. You can do it with atmosphere and dust flooding this entire city. Or we can do it with Godzilla's breath. We could take in these smoke elements, the smoke being shot out of this air compressor, and then we can stencil out Godzilla. We can create a mask for his mouth and say, okay, wherever it's white, I want that to be cut out of our smoke pass. And very, very quickly, we can create this 3D breath that looks like we must have simulated it or done some crazy technique, but all we're doing is using real life footage and combining it with these depth passes and with these position passes, and we're able to make it feel like it's there in our 3D scene. So that's why we want to render out all those passes. And this is what it looks like when everything comes together. And again, that went by pretty quick, so I'll just play through this one more time. And yes, this is in Nuke. The same ideas do apply in After Effects, but I personally use Nuke. And why I use Nuke is because After Effects is great for 1 or 2 shots, but when we're working at a visual effects studio, ultimately, you need a tool that's going to work for 1,000 shots, or at the very least, working with hundreds of shots. I've made some short films in the past in Unreal, like the music video for War of Being, which is the samurai sword fight, where that was over 120 shots. So we need the right tool to create multiple shots. But these are the really great shortcuts that you can use to create these more advanced looking effects, but they take a couple minutes to assemble together instead of taking hours to get the perfect breath simulation and getting everything working together. And again, when you're using real life footage, it just looks more realistic. So a last touch here, I think I have one last shot as well. Yeah, so for this shot as well, we have the rain is its own stock footage. The explosion is its own stock footage. So the explosion wasn't added in Unreal, it was added inside of Nuke using these techniques. So we're still adding the lights into our 3D scene, so we have real 3D lights. The muzzle flashes and everything are in our real 3D scene, but all of the smoke and the explosions, we want to find the best footage possible and combine it all together. So that's why we added those after the fact inside of Nuke. And by the way, if you don't know, Nuke is completely free for you to use for your own personal projects. And it is the software that you will end up using at a visual effects studio. I have not worked at a single visual effects studio ever that has used After Effects. And every single one I've worked at, they only expect you to use Nuke. So it is the tool for feature film visual effects. And yeah, that is the process here of how we were able to get this entire scene put together in just a day here and not simulate all of these explosions. This explosion was actually a free explosion that you can also download. Another great free resource here from Compositing Academy from Alex Hanneman over there. Literally, he's a buddy of mine. We worked at MPC for years over on Alien Covenant was our first show together, and we've had the chance to work on a couple movies now at this point. But yeah, he literally put these explosions out for free. I've used them on the Dune shot and in this shot as well. They're really, really great, and they have all the passes that you'll need to make them look awesome inside of Nuke. So definitely check that out over on his channel. Just type in Free Explosion Comp Academy. I'm sure that'll pop up for you. But yeah, that is the process there for adding in sparks, for adding in explosions, effects, rain. It's all by creating image planes, taking real life footage, placing it somewhere in 3D space. And the secret sauce here is we're using that camera from Unreal so that we're getting a real 3D camera and it looks identical to just placing this footage inside of Unreal in the first place. But this way we can really fine-tune things. We don't have to worry about our GPU crashing or doing anything like that. We can just add in those final details and add that last 10%. And then this is the biggest problem with old school visual effects as well, and the way that Maya and Blender and all the other 3D packages out there render, is that the more detail you add into your scene, the longer it takes to render, which is so disappointing too, because at the end you're like, oh, I want to add in all that final detail. I want to make it look exactly like it would in real life. But by doing that, it can end up making your renders take 2 times, 5 times, or 10 times longer, depending on how much geometry you end up putting in your scene. So this is the old school way. This is what we're all used to. If you've used the other 3D softwares, I've used them a ton. That's why I've ended up stumbling back onto Unreal instead of going down that path, is because I was just so sick and tired of waiting around for all these CG renders. And the reality is, if you want to render out a 10-minute movie out of Blender, out of Cinema 4D, out of these other packages, if you wait 10 minutes for your render, which is totally if you wait 10 minutes for one frame, which is that is typical. That is what you're going to wait for. For a high quality Godzilla level visual effects render out of Blender, it's gonna take 10 minutes to render out one frame, and at 24 frames per second, 60 seconds for a 10-minute long movie, it will take over 600 days to render that out on one machine. And why I'm telling you this is because it's completely impractical to try to make some of these big budget blockbuster level visual effects when we're using some of the old techniques in some of the old softwares. It's just so slow, and that is honestly the biggest problem, is that you have to end up waiting for these renders at every single stage, from the animation to the effects to the lighting to the compositing. And honestly, that is the key reason why I've started to go all in on Unreal Engine, is because I'm so sick of all these other rendering roadblocks. And if you think about that, what happens to your flow state when you have to wait around 10 minutes or hours just to see your final result? Especially when we're talking about animations here, and we're not just talking about rendering one still frame. When you're talking about making movies in CG, you have to wait for renders. At least you did before Unreal. So to avoid all of those roadblocks in the way, we're not going to make our films like the visual effects studios do. The way that we want to do it is with real-time rendering. It's with Unreal Engine. And one of the big epiphanies I had on War of Being, which, like I said, that was that samurai sword fight. It's that music video we made for the band Tesseract, which you can check out after this. We made a behind the scenes as well over on the channel if you haven't seen that. Is that by using Unreal Engine, we're no longer waiting for anything. But if we spend our time very, very quickly, if you're not careful, you can end up spending 80% of your time worrying about the rendering and compositing side instead of working in real time in your viewport, just worrying about what your final film is going to look like. So we want to eliminate that last step. We want our compositing and our rendering to go by as fast as possible. So a lot of people ask me with Unreal, should I use path tracing? Should I crank up my render settings and use path tracing with Unreal? And to me, my point of view, the answer is no. The whole reason that we're using Unreal Engine is for the real-time rendering. It's the idea that working in real time will give you more chances. You'll be able to be more creative faster, all in real time, than going through that process of waiting around for renders in any way, shape, or form. And the same is true for compositing. So typically, whether you're in After Effects or whether you're in Nuke, when you are just like playing back your renders for the first time, this is how slow it takes just to preview your render. Like I'm just caching my playback inside of Nuke and inside of After Effects. It's about the same speed for both of them. And it's like, wait, just to watch my render back, is this slow? Like it almost doesn't make sense. I forgot how slow this part of the process was until I was working in Unreal in real time all the time. And I was like, how the heck is a 3D viewport faster than working in After Effects or working in Nuke? But the reality is, it just is way faster. So the big epiphany for me, when I'm now not trying to think of how do I just make visual effects, but how do I make better films? How do I make that whole process easier, faster, and simpler so I can make my own visual effects from home and be my own at-home visual effects studio? If I want to do that successfully, you need to rethink your entire pipeline. And the biggest epiphany I had is that your workflow, your pipeline, is either all real time or it's not real time. And as soon as you have other parts of your process that are slow, that are not real time, that are at the speed of you're looking at one frame at a time instead of watching sequences back, that is where all of your dreams go to die. It's because it's just so slow when you're going through this old school way of rendering. So what we want to do with Unreal 5 is avoid all of that at every stage. We get to just zip past all of these different steps. And my solution for figuring out the compositing side of this to make this real time is what I call the one-click compositing template. And this basically just takes all of the classic lens effects looks that I'll apply at a Hollywood visual effects studio, all those techniques, and put it into one single template that you literally just drag and drop a couple sliders. And that way you're making creative decisions in real time. And then at the end of your day, you can take your entire sequence and render out your shots. They end up taking a bit longer, but that's at the end of your day. And so while you're working on the sequence, you're working on the animation, you're working in real time, and you're just worried about the old school way of rendering at the end of the day when you throw all your renders out, or you just launch them all at the end of your workday and you get everything done. So that's the idea of the one-click template that I built there, is just to speed up that entire process so you're not so worried about rendering the entire time. Rendering becomes, or compositing, I should say, compositing now can be a bit more of an afterthought because we have a great template that just applies all of those Hollywood visual effects and those lens effects to our shot without having to spend a lot of time on it. But yeah, does that make sense? Does that at least show you that compositing pipeline, how you can take your shots to the next level, how you can add real life stock footage to level up your renders and make them look better than ever before? I hope that at least really starts to break down that whole process and show how I took just an Unreal Engine render and was able to take it all the way to that Hollywood visual effects look. And I'll just bring up this one last example here, and just so we can kind of see that in action for one last time. So if we look back here, we can actually see Godzilla with sparks, with explosions, with rain, with glow, with chromatic aberration, with all the fun stuff, all applied at one time. And this is what we want to do. We want to focus on the fun, creative aspects of filmmaking, of visual effects, and not spend our time waiting around and doing complicated parts of the process. So I hope you got some tips there to at least eliminate some of that and see how we can go over into Hollywood visual effects land and start hitting that caliber of work. It's by taking your shots to the next level through compositing. So we've touched on compositing, we've touched on how to build cinematic environments faster and easier, and we also showed you how to go from idea to final film all inside of Unreal. So with that, do you think you at least have enough after watching this that you could start creating one shot, one screenshot, and turn that into one shot? Because if you can do that, one visual effects shot, that means that you literally now can start making your own action scenes, your own sequences. You can build your own demo reels. If you can build a shot, you can build a demo reel, which you can show off to go and get hired at these visual effects studios. And ultimately, you can land that first job and just make the best looking visual effects you possibly can. Is that pretty cool? Sweet. So I know we went through a lot. How many of you are a little bit overwhelmed? I did try to go through all the highlights, but I know as someone starting out that this can definitely feel like a lot. It's kind of like drinking through a fire hose or something like that. It's just a lot all at once. I wish I could cram even more, but sometimes, you can't. Our brains can only take so much at one time. So for any of you out there that are looking for a little bit of a shortcut to learn Unreal faster and easier, I have a little bit of an offer here that I put together to just make that process easier than ever before. For those of you that are interested, stick around and then we'll kind of walk through this, because the process of learning Unreal should be easy. It should be fun. It shouldn't take you 12 months, 18 months just to start making your first film. And when I got started, that's how long it took. And now we're able to get you that result in just 3 weeks if you want to follow along. So the question really becomes, can a complete beginner really start to learn Unreal 5? Or is it just for people like me who have that visual effects experience? Well, to me, the answer is an obvious no. I've had the chance to work with Mark Jason, who said that he never thought he'd be able to understand anything inside of Unreal, but now he feels like he can make a decent environment. And Mark Jason is actually a music producer who uses Unreal to make his own music videos and films. And the reality is, you can make your own action scenes, your own war movies, anything you want really, hand-to-hand combat, using Unreal Engine. It can be something stylized, it can be something realistic, and this is the same tools and tool set that's used to start working on set in virtual production. You're learning the same exact tools, and we need to learn the engine part of Unreal Engine and learn how everything works together. And you would be surprised how much all of these techniques just cross-transfer over into the same skill set that you need to work on set. You're learning most of the same things, you just learn an extra 20% to actually go off and work on set and work on an LED stage. So the biggest problem that it's just so difficult, because I'll say it too, like I started trying to learn all this stuff on YouTube. I went through it for like 3 months, tried to build a bunch of projects, and I just felt like I could recreate other tutorials, but I didn't understand how Unreal worked. And the problem was that I was learning all of these features and these like click by click tutorials, but I wasn't actually learning the filmmaking workflow. I wasn't learning how to go from idea to finished film in that way of how can I go from sourcing characters, of sourcing animations, of building out the film itself, instead of just learning how to build one specific type of blueprint or one specific rendering feature. Like, you can learn all of the tiny little tactics on YouTube. That's what YouTube is actually the best for, is you'll find those up-to-date tactics out there, but it's not so good at the strategies and the workflows to get you there. And that's honestly the biggest reason that a lot of artists fail when learning Unreal 5, is we are going in hoping that we have this really clean learning curve where it's really fast, really quick early on, but in practice, most people, they learn a lot when they're following along step by step through a couple things, but as soon as it gets hard, as soon as they go to make their own first project, they get stuck in the valley of despair. Things don't work like how you thought they would. And the fundamental problem here is that we're learning a game engine to create movies. We're not learning a visual effects engine. And this is why it's so hard for a lot of people. A lot of people try and they fail, or they make 1 or 2 projects, but they don't go any further. And the real reason why is they're trying to apply their old school visual effects pipeline into Unreal instead of learning how Unreal works in the first place. So they make the mistake of learning visual effects first and then moving on to game dev, instead of learning a little bit of game dev first, which might not be so familiar, but you don't need to learn how to publish your own game on Steam. You just need to learn how games work inside of Unreal, which is a very quick process. And once you learn that, then you apply some of the visual effects and filmmaking techniques that you probably already know onto the game dev concepts, and it becomes incredibly easy. It's really fast. You can actually start creating shots and your own films with confidence because you know how it's supposed to be working in the first place. So that's why, to me, I try to let a lot of beginners know this, is that the bottleneck with Unreal, it's the hardest part of it is just learning in the first place. Whereas the bottleneck with the old school way of working with visual effects is that you have that bottleneck of rendering every single time, every shot, every sequence, you have to wait for render times. Where with Unreal, you don't have to wait for render times anymore, but you do have that bottleneck of learning Unreal, figuring it out for the first time, which takes longer than other systems because it's just been so hard to learn, because where do you go to do it? So how I actually ended up learning Unreal Engine in the first place was I got this opportunity to go on set for Avatar: The Last Airbender. I knew a little bit of Unreal, but they told me I was gonna be on set on the world's largest LED volume, and I was not about to go on set unprepared. So the way that I actually ended up learning everything was I literally quit my job on the spot as soon as I got that offer. I knew this was something I wanted to do. Avatar was so huge to me growing up, and I knew I had to take this opportunity, but I didn't feel prepared in Unreal. So I literally took off of my job, stopped taking a salary, going leading up to that opportunity, so that I could just put my head down and make 4 different practice projects all in one time, read through the documentation, go through everything, learn it all myself, so I actually understood how the system works in the first place. But what was so funny is that I spent all that time going crazy, doing these super long days, trying to learn everything. But after that first week of being on set on Avatar: The Last Airbender, being able to work shoulder to shoulder with other people who have used Unreal before for visual effects, for filmmaking, for all these different use cases, I honestly learned more in that first week than I did from that entire month of me trying to piece together all these different things on my own. And that was really eye-opening to me, because I thought I would be able, I kind of prided myself on being a self-taught artist in the past, but Unreal, it was genuinely difficult because I was not a game developer at all. That was not a skill set I had ever worked on in any capacity. So that's the biggest problem here, is that you're using a game engine to create films, and there's all these tiny little features and obstacles that get in your path. I call this the skill bridge, because if you want to go from idea to final film, you need to know the game dev techniques, you need to know the visual effects techniques, and if you're missing any one of these skills, then you can't cross the bridge. That's the harsh reality of Unreal, is that you can get stuck on any one of these small things. And on their own, none of these are hard to learn. The hard part is learning all of them in the right order, without getting discouraged, without spending 6 months to do it, without spending a lot of time to get there. We just want to be able to know how to make films in Unreal right away. And so if you tie game dev and visual effects together, that gives you the easiest route possible to actually learn all of these. So if all you needed was 30 minutes a day to learn Unreal Engine, would that make it easier? Would that make it a bit more approachable and easier to do? Well, that's exactly why I put together Unreal Fundamentals. I actually want to help you make your own films and build a demo reel and have it just take 3 weeks and not 3 months, or God forbid, even longer. Because like I said, any of us can genuinely make these types of films. I started off as someone completely self-taught, learning this on my own on YouTube, and by working with other people, learning from great people, and being at the right place at the right time, I was able to work on some of these big films. And I want to give you the absolute best shot and best opportunity to take your films to that level. So that's why I created Unreal Fundamentals. This is the training series where we'll take you from a complete beginner inside of Unreal to mastering filmmaking in just 21 days. So we use prior productions that I've worked on. This short film, this is War of Being, this is that samurai sword fight. We use this as a real production case study, and basically all of the lessons I learned from creating this project went into making a simple, easy to use roadmap that anyone could follow, so you can start building your own environments, adding your own animations, and learn all the processes to make your own films completely on your own, and eventually work as your own at-home visual effects studio, taking on your own clients or just creating your own ideas at a really high level. So we'll take you through every single part of the process. This is 18 hours long, and this can be done in 30 to 60 minute chunks day after day. And I honestly believe that anyone can create films using Unreal Engine. You just have to master a couple of these skills, and we'll teach you absolutely everything that you need to learn along the way. So that's Unreal Fundamentals. It's a 21-day boot camp where we'll create 3 environments. We'll create 2 films with characters, with animations from scratch, so that you can learn the entire filmmaking pipeline as you go, and not just follow a couple of tutorials, but actually give you the confidence to make your own films. And that's kind of how we end things at the end, is we teach you how to create films on your own. We give you the resources for animations, for characters, for environments. So 1, you can build them on your own, or 2, you can find the best resources out there and make your own previs and animations as fast as humanly possible. We'll give you the roadmaps for both so that you can just get started right away and actually start creating your own action scenes. Have 2 characters duke it out and design your own fight choreography yourself, even if you don't know how to animate, which is pretty cool. So I had 2 choices when I was making this. One was to go super short, super simple, keep it really cheap. but I honestly didn't know if that would help people because it's the problem is stringing all of these different lessons together. And once you actually understand how it all connects, it becomes surprisingly easy. That's why this Godzilla project took less than a week to get those 5 shots together, including the previs. We're spending an extra week to get everything else wrapped up. But in a very short amount of time, you can start assembling these really complex projects if you learn how it all works together. But in order to do that, I needed to be able to give you characters and models and environments and pour into this and make sure you had all of the different resources that you would need along the way. And that's why we've actually been able to help 500 other folks just like you do the same thing, is because we're actually trying to solve each one of those really hard technical problems along the way. So Unreal Fundamentals on its own would be really cool, but I want to over deliver. I want to absolutely solve every roadblock you might have as you're learning Unreal as fast as possible, because we need to get over the skill bridge. We need to learn all of these tiny skills, and I want to give you some of the best resources I've ever made completely for free along with Unreal Fundamentals. So instead of waiting around for super long render times, we can leverage the power of real-time rendering with these lightning fast render presets. These are like, I've already made them. I tested out, I did all the math to find the fastest render presets possible so that I've eliminated all of the guesswork. You get the absolute fastest render presets out there, so you never have to wait around for renders ever again. And I continue to update these as I learn new techniques. So I actually updated this based on the Dune project file that I put out, the Dune in 24 hours video. I learned some new techniques on how to get better motion blur without spending a lot of time rendering, and you'll get all of those presets included with the lightning fast render presets here. So they're battle tested, they're production ready. I use these every single day. Literally, I don't use something else. These are the exact same ones I use. And if I use a different technique, I update these to make sure that you are using the exact same presets I'm using, and you can eliminate all of that guesswork and just use the best, most effective tools. Another huge tool that helped me, and I would love it if it could help you, is my one-click compositing template. You can use this, literally, you just take your Unreal render, you slap this at the bottom, and then drag and drop a couple sliders, and you're able to add this Hollywood visual effects look to your own renders. You'll get the same glow, the imperfections of a camera lens, that diffusion, the chromatic aberration, everything fine-tuned with those same Hollywood visual effects techniques that I've learned at studios, that I've developed and found my own personal recipe. I made the best, fastest version of this, put it all in one place. And again, this is the same tool I use on my own projects because I love it that much. It actually works. It's what I actually use. It's not like a lesser version of it. It's the real exact same tool that I use on all of my renders. So you can steal my exact render template and get all of the techniques that I'm applying and just drag and drop them onto your own renders just like that. And yeah, apply all the techniques that go into some of those cool movies. Another step here is materials. So you might know stuff about materials from other packages. If you know Blender, if you know Maya, you might know some things. But again, we're learning the game dev side of Unreal first. And all of the same techniques are there in Unreal, but everything is named differently. They're packaged in different ways. Sometimes you have to assemble a couple nodes together to get the same effect you might be expecting from Maya or from Blender, or just as a way to make it really simple to create materials and surfaces that look true to life. So that's why I created this material cheat sheet. It's all of the best nodes in the material graph. It's basically 2 years of all of my biggest findings with the material graph, assembling them all into one single cheat sheet. And we have an hour breaking down how every single one of these works so you can apply them to your own materials so you can get these complex materials super easy. We did the same thing for blueprints. Blueprints is another huge sticking point for folks learning Unreal. It doesn't have to be hard. In fact, I think the biggest reason it's difficult is because people are explaining it as if you need to use it for a game instead of showing you how to use it to make environments and make artist-friendly tools with blueprints. So blueprints can let you make virtual cameras, motion capture cameras. It also can make cloud cards or those glow cards we showed earlier today. You can use blueprints to create these really simple drag and drop tools that combine a couple different effects together so that you can add things like clouds, clouds and depth and atmosphere into your shots super quickly. So we'll show you how to build this. We have an entire framework, an entire guide on how to use blueprints to make your own tools super easily inside of Unreal, so you can use them as a filmmaker instead of as a game developer, and you can use them to make better films faster. So that is our Blueprints for Beginners guide, and we used that to create the cloud cards for this this Dune project. And yeah, super great. Really proud of that segment. We also have an entire glossary. I'll start going through all this, but we also have lesson recaps. So we'll email you every day to hold you accountable and make sure you get the best lessons, the best training every single day, so you actually get that result in just 21 days. That is the entire roadmap, but we are missing one critical skill, and that's filmmaking. We also teach you how to make your own films. So like I said, we have this entire production case study. We'll show you how that works with motion capture and how you would apply that to your own films. But don't worry if you don't have motion capture equipment or anything like that. The same can be applied, and you can create your own action scenes and your own fight choreography using pre-existing animations, and we'll show you exactly how. This is a practice project that we'll build together to show you how to make your own lightsaber battles with effects, with explosions, with sparks, with animated drones, all this craziness, and we'll walk you through how to build it step by step. This is chapter 11. It's a newer chapter in Unreal Fundamentals where we're taking the lid off and showing you the whole filmmaking process and making it super easy. Now you might be thinking, like, that's cool, sounds like a lot of tutorials and stuff like that. Will this actually work? Or am I just gonna make projects that look like the practice projects? And the answer is no. What is so cool, what is most rewarding to me personally, is seeing all of the student work coming out of Unreal Fundamentals. And it's not copycat projects of replicating what I've done in the past. It's people learning the techniques, actually understanding the fundamentals so that they can create their own films all on their own. We've had so many people make films for their own YouTube channels, for clients, for bands, for music videos, for all these different avenues, because it's all the same fundamental techniques. You just learn it once, and then you'll get more and more comfortable every single time, so you can add animations with vehicles, with characters, all this cool stuff, and you'll learn the entire pipeline as we go. So that's Unreal Fundamentals. That is the training course. That's all the videos. We have our own portal. That's the lightning fast render presets, the one-click template, the material cheat sheet, blueprints for beginners, our lesson recaps, accountability emails, the glossary. We have a bonus beginners hotkey bonus section, which is really fun. And you can get all of that if you join today. Now, I could easily bundle all this stuff. This is the biggest lessons I've ever learned, all the templates, all the cheat sheets, the stuff I use in my own freelance projects and the techniques I use at studios. I definitely could have bundled this up for some crazy price. I don't want to do that. That's not why I started this. I started as someone who actually dropped out of college. I don't want anyone out here paying some exorbitant college prices. But this is just the start. We got some cool bonuses just for those of you on this call right now. If you want to learn all of this and get the complete filmmaking roadmap, I have a couple bonuses I want to throw in here just for you folks that are here right now. So bonus number one is I want to give you the exact plane model that I used in the Godzilla in that Godzilla sequence. This is the Bristol Bulldog. It's fully rigged, the propellers, the wings, the interior, all the gauges, everything. And we actually have an entire bonus chapter, chapter 12, showing you exactly how to use this so you can create your own demo reel with vehicles, with explosions, with tracer fire, all the bells and whistles. I'll show you how to do it step by step and teach you how to make your own plane battle, your own dogfight, along with me. And literally, this is exactly what we make in Unreal Fundamentals. This is what we made by the end of it, and we'll walk you through it in chapter 12. You'll get the model for free. You'll get an entire bonus module just for signing up now. I also am going to throw in this extra bonus. I actually went ahead and for this Dune project file, I had to do some extra homework to make this work. But I went ahead and I actually found the guy who made this ornithopter model in the first place and bought out that model so that I could include everything you're seeing here as a free bonus project. if you sign up today. So this is the Dune project file. It's the ornithopters, it's the animations, it's everything you're seeing. The explosions aren't included, but everything else, that's a free download that you can get elsewhere. You'll get this entire environment, and you can see exactly how I assemble complex environments like this, and you can open it up on your own machine. You could create your own shots. You could create your own Dune sequence by just following along and using this project file. Pretty cool, I hope. And yeah, so this alone, buying out the rights to that model took $1,000 on its own because someone took a lot of time to actually create that entire model. And then now we're just going to include it for free for those of you in here. And then obviously I had to spend all the time to get that project file up and ready. Easily could be $2,000, but again, not for those of you folks that are looking to level up today. It's going to be completely free if you want to sign up. And then beyond that, I want to bring you in and teach you the Hollywood visual effects secrets that I learned working at a studio. Because if you want to be job ready to work at a real Hollywood visual effects studio, then you have to know Nuke. I took a poll of 600 different artists, and I found only 10% of you knew how to use Nuke. The rest of you have no idea how to use it. And if you want to work at a studio, this is a software you must learn. The good thing is it's completely free for you to download and use on your own personal projects, which means that we can learn it and apply these techniques to our Unreal renders. One of the big things that we'll learn here is green screens, how to combine CGI with live action footage, how to take your shots to the next level, how to use that template, and we'll even show you how to take green screen footage, recreate that camera so you can create backgrounds in Unreal. So basically we can do our camera tracking, so you could take footage of a band, of any footage from a client, and you could change out that background, turn it into an Unreal sequence so you could make your own virtual production shorts at home as long as you have a green screen. We'll walk through that entire process and how to upgrade your renders. We have bonus project files of my Mr. Freeze short film. I've included all the renders, all of the render passes, extra bonus footage, smoke elements, all that fun stuff. And we've actually been able to teach some Hollywood pros a couple new tricks. So this is Howard Gersh, who literally was a senior TD over at ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. He went through the training and he said he's used Nuke in production, but his shots would have truly benefited from all the cool nuggets he learned in this class. We also had someone who's a complete beginner. So those of you who don't know Nuke, don't worry. Jean Denis said that he came in knowing nothing about compositing, just the basics of Unreal, and that this was packed with insights, and he was able to learn the entire system just by going through all this training. So it doesn't have to take you 10 years to learn all these crazy tricks. I'm going to teach you everything I know in just one extra day of training with the project files, with the bonus training, with all the templates. We'll show you how to use them, and you'll be able to create cinematic renders every single time. Normally, this would cost $4.99 with the bonuses, with the project files, with the training. But again, this is going to be just a cherry on top if you're looking to sign up for Unreal Fundamentals. And as a last step, I want to make sure none of you get left behind. I want to make sure everyone gets creative feedback on their own work, because if you're just on your own, it's very hard. Very, very quickly you can get stuck. You get stuck troubleshooting. You don't know where to turn next. Or maybe you know how to use Unreal, but you just need to figure out how to take your shots to the next level. And to me, the best way to do that is to get creative feedback on your work. So that's why we have a private Discord where we post work in progresses every single Wednesday. We share our work. You can get feedback from the community. You can get feedback from me, from anyone that's already joined. And this is not publicly available. This is just for the folks that are taking this seriously, who want to level up and take their films to the next level, all this good stuff. And this is a spot for all of us to come in, share the best techniques, share tools, share resources, all in real time, and make sure that you get feedback every step of the way. So again, a lot of people, they'll end up charging for extra feedback, extracurricular stuff, getting you answers for troubleshooting. We're not going to do that. I want to give you everything you're seeing here, not for some crazy price, not for over $5,000. Not for $19.97, which just the core offer, just all the bonuses, all the cheat sheets, all the time it took for me to develop this in the first place and take all the lessons I learned from War of Being and distill them down. Easily could have gone there, but I don't want you to pay that much. That's just insane. I don't even want you to pay $5.97, which is what it normally costs. I'll give you everything you're seeing here, just for those of you on here live. I'll give you this entire bonus section, Unreal Fundamentals, all the bonuses for just $497. The free course, the free Unreal the Nuke Masterclass, the free plane model, the Dune project file, all included completely for free when you sign up to Unreal Fundamentals. So I'm going to post in the chat here. I'm going to share this link so that you guys got it. Otherwise, just go to unrealforvfx.com/go. That's the same link, and that will get you in there. And yeah, we'll just make sure that this goes in here, and then I'll pin this to the top. There we go. And yeah, the idea here is just to make this entire process as simple as possible. There are lots of roadblocks in the way, and I don't want them to get in your way. I know how long it took me, and I don't want you waiting around 6 months or 12 months just to start making your first film. If you go through this, you could literally start making your first film in just 2 to 3 weeks from now and start making it with confidence, and get everything you're looking to do with filmmaking, with visual effects, and have the skills to be job ready at a real studio. So yeah, we have 50 seats available total for this. If you want to sign up, go to unrealforvfx.com/go. You can get everything you're seeing now for just $497, all the crazy bonuses, all of that, all in one go. Just use that link there. This will expire Sunday night. We'll be doing replays of this event until Sunday, and then this is going down. All the offers going down. And there's 2 things I want you to know, because some of you, I know this is a lot of money for sure. It can be a lot. I think it's going to save you so much time and so much headache. And honestly, this is the exact training I would have wanted when I first started. But I understand that not everyone just has that ready at a moment's notice. So we have one other way that you can get started today with Unreal Fundamentals, and you can actually get started right now for just $99. It's $99 and then 5 total payments. But yeah, you can get started right now for just $99, and both of these are completely backed by a 30-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. If it's not right for you, don't worry about it. Like, the worst thing that can happen is that you want to get started and you just decide not to, and then you look back 2 months from now saying like, man, I just wish I would have done it. I don't want anyone to feel that way, that they missed out or that they couldn't get started when they had the opportunity. So if you want to get started, you can get started right now for $99, and you have 30 days to decide if it's right for you. And you can let me know 30 days from now if you went through it and you said, hey, I thought this would be easier and it's not. Even though everyone's been able to make some really cool projects at the end of making it, even if it doesn't work out for you, you have nothing to worry about. Just shoot us a message and we'll make sure you get all of your money back 100%. We just want to give you the best opportunity possible to learn Unreal, because ultimately, to me, just not enough people know these filmmaking workflows. I want to make bigger and better films in Unreal, and that means we need more people in the community making these awesome films too. So yeah, this is the best way to do it. Go to unrealforvfx.com/go, or just click the link in the chat below. That's going to be the best spot there. And yeah, we'll have until this evening to get started there. So yeah, we'll answer some questions here, but just to walk through this, again, we're going to be able to eliminate rendering. You're going to be able to eliminate camera gear. And ultimately what I love this for is that you can actually practice filmmaking for free without bothering your friends, without hiring 8 people to show up, without paying for film equipment and lights and gear and all this stuff. You can actually practice your vision as a filmmaker, as a director. And you know, all of those skills, that creative eye that you're building in Unreal, transfers into live action, transfers into any other 3D software or any artistic endeavor you're after. We're going to teach you the techniques. We're also going to make sure, no matter what, that you learn the art along with it too, because honestly, I think that's more important. So yeah, this is our student reel. Just to play this one last time, this is what folks have been able to make as they've gone through the training. And yeah, just to show that, yeah, it's not just a copy paste of another tutorial. This is actually going through teaching you how to make films yourself, not just how to go through another tutorial series like you'll find everywhere else. So yeah, also seeing Shannon that you joined up just now. That's super awesome. Thanks for joining. That's sweet. And yeah, I'm also seeing Eric. Welcome aboard to Unreal Fundamentals. That's super cool. But yeah, we'll answer any questions you got here. Would love to answer anything. A big question I get early on too is, hey, I don't know if I have the right machine for this. The reality is you don't need a complex machine to run Unreal Engine. If you have a gaming PC, I can almost guarantee that you have a good enough machine to get started in Unreal, and you can always upgrade as you go. That's how I started. That's how many people start, is you don't need to have a crazy expensive machine right away. As long as you have like a 1080 Ti graphics card, which is not very expensive. That's actually, it's been a standard for a very long time. Yeah, that's a great graphics card to get started with. But again, most gaming PCs are enough. It works on Mac. Unreal is now almost fully supported on Mac. They're updating it every single time to get better and better and better. So yeah, now is the best time for any Mac users as well. And then yeah, a couple other students. Louis Cha, he joined just a few weeks ago. He started out as a complete beginner, did not know anything about Unreal, was not a visual effects artist, and he said he could get up and running in just 3 weeks, and he was able to make his first films. We also had Jonas Singh, who is someone, his YouTube channel is at Zalushi. Go check him out. He's like a VR YouTuber. He makes some really great stuff. I think he's over 500K subscribers now. But yeah, he said he knew next to nothing about Unreal, and he gained the skills to build scenes and render cinematics from scratch after going through this. And this is some of his work. So he's able to make his own Star Wars film. He actually added cutscenes into a Star Wars VR game he was playing. It's actually a super cool video. You can go to his channel and check it out. But yeah, he's able to tell big stories. And again, telling his own story, he came up with his own script and was able to use this as a fun cutscene in the middle to basically tie together a scene of him in VR with another planet. And this is the stormtrooper escaping to the next ship. So yeah, and now he's going on to add himself as his own metahuman, and so now he can be in his own lightsaber battles himself. There's a lot of cool stuff that you can do with this. And again, it's the same building blocks. Once you get the basics, it's very easy to just add in, okay, I know everything else, now let's add in motion capture, or let's add in facial animation. Adding in one extra thing to each project is very simple once you understand how the whole system works together. We also had Felipe Finner, who said now he can work faster and more focused as a director and 3D artist. And Jay Lee from Vancouver, who, yeah, said he would recommend it to anyone in a heartbeat. And that meant a lot to me because this was the project that Jay Lee made. He ended up making some shots from Blade Runner, trying to apply that Hollywood visual effects look to Unreal. So this was made completely in Unreal, using the same exact techniques that we walked through today. And he was able to make this in less than a week. Oh yeah, this was the other shot, the wide shot, to see it from multiple angles, not just one or two, and apply it all together. We also had some folks from studios. So Tom Davis from Sony ImageWorks. I worked over at Sony ImageWorks back for Across the Spider-Verse. But yeah, he ended up taking the program. He said it was easy to understand compared to other courses. And yeah, he's someone in the industry using it and applying it. And Sony was the studio that actually is using Unreal Engine for Love, Death, and Robots. They made In Vaulted Tombs, which is that Love, Death, and Robots episode. So yeah, visual effects studios are migrating over to Unreal, and it's never been a better time to actually make films on your own from your own PC. But yeah, thankfully, at this point, we have lots of really cool testimonials. It's cool to me to know that it's not just me thinking it'll work, that it actually works, that so many people have been able to go through this and get the results that they were hoping for. And yeah, would love to help you do the same. So we'll answer any questions here. If you got any last questions, let me know. I'll go over back into the chat here. But again, this is everything you'll get if you go to unrealforvfx.com/go. You get Unreal Fundamentals, the lightning fast render presets, the one-click template, blueprints for beginners, our glossary, the Discord access, our accountability emails, everything you're seeing here on top of the plane itself, a fully rigged plane, and how to use it so you can build your own demo reel piece using this plane and animating your own dogfight. We'll also give you the Dune project files so you can open these up and see exactly how these complex environments are built and even make your own Dune film by yourself. And you'll even get the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass, which usually is a completely separate course, fully paid, has its own project files, has its own everything, and you'll get that as a bonus if you want to sign up today. And you can get started for just $99 with that 30-day money-back guarantee. So I want to just make it as easy as possible. We'll go back over to the questions, but for those of you interested, check it out, unrealforvfx.com/go. I also want to thank a couple of those of you that are in, seeing Mateo, thanks for joining, man. Alex, you're in there too. Richard, Kate, and Eric, that's awesome, man. Thanks for joining. We'll definitely see you in there. I'll see you in the Discord. Can't wait to see what you make. But yeah, that is, you can get started for just $99 there. And you have until Sunday to make up your mind if you need a couple days to think about it. I totally get that too. You'll have until Sunday or until we run out of those 50 seats. The page will go down once that has gone down. I think I've answered what computer do I need. Also, for those of you that have tried before and you started Unreal and it just didn't quite click, again, I would just say it's definitely because it didn't click for me either. I literally gave up the first time I tried learning Unreal because I just didn't know how those game dev techniques would work. The way we walk you through it is we just teach you how to make your own Pac-Man. A super simple game. It takes 30 minutes. And just through going through that one single exercise, you'll understand all of the game, the important game engine techniques that you need to know for Unreal Engine. And don't worry, you don't need to know how to code. Blueprints for Beginners is there, so you don't need to know any programming or coding knowledge beforehand. And that's the only side of things where you would even need to know how to code. So a lot of people overestimate how technical it's going to be. I can promise you, if you go through this, we'll show you only the things that matter, and most of the things you don't need to look at or care about. You don't need to know C++, you don't need to know how to code, you don't even need to understand programming at the beginning. We'll teach you everything you need to know there. But yeah, we'll jump back over to the comment section, answer any questions. Would love to, I'll open up the chat here on my desktop. I'm rocking one monitor today, so I couldn't look at both at the same time. So thanks for putting in any questions. I'll definitely check out some now. Let's take a look. Mindset Brandon, is After Effects and Nuke included? So yeah, the one-click compositing template is for After Effects and for Nuke. So we'll teach you how to learn Nuke if you don't know Nuke, but we also have that one-click template as an After Effects template. It's not a Nuke-only tool. It's also as a template set up so you can drag and drop in your renders into After Effects as you would expect. And again, it's super, super easy. It's just a simple template, and you can get started using that template there. There is a Nuke PLE. Don't know what that, personal learning something, personal license. Yes, I cut out After Effects in favor of DaVinci and Blender. You'd be surprised what you can do without After Effects. Yeah, we'll eventually have a Resolve version as well. We don't at the moment, but again, Nuke is completely free to use, and I think it's, even if you just use it for this template, we'll teach you just the things you need to know, and you don't need to worry about all the other variations. We'll teach you the few things that really, really matter, and then you can just worry about staying in Unreal and really using that template as basically your camera filter to just make it look like it was shot through a camera lens without having you spend a ton of time to make that happen. Cool. Paul Montgomery, this will be cool maybe in the future. Yeah, totally get that, Paul. We do run these every so often. Usually we'll do them over the weekends or whatever during these live events. But yeah, a VFX artist Discord will be awesome, guys. Caleb, that's sweet. Yeah, if you want to join the Discord, this is the best way to do it. We'll see if there's any other questions. Isaiah, do you show how to make animations at all in this course, or would we just use pre-made animations from sites to make them? Great question. So we get you started with pre-made animations because we want to make sure you understand how to make a film start to finish first. That's what's most important. Then we'll teach you vehicle animations so you understand how to keyframe your own vehicles and tell stories that way. And literally right now, that is the next chapter we're working on now, the super secret chapter 14, which is literally in progress as we speak, is how to build your own control rig and how to animate characters all in one. So that is coming. I swear it's going to be in the next version, and you'll get lifetime updates if you join now. So you get all the future updates. So all the people that joined Unreal Fundamentals 6 months ago, they got the project files when they came through. They got the bonus chapters. And again, we're continuing to update it with all the latest and greatest techniques that we learn along the way. Also seeing Mark, you joined in. That's awesome. And Brandon, welcome in. Super glad to have you. We'll see you in the Discord. Can't wait to see you there. But yeah, primarily through Mixamo, and then we will eventually add in more character animation. To me, it's actually super important. I feel like I want to teach what I am best at. I don't want to teach things I'm not great at. So in this case, I'm actually getting other teachers to come in who are great animators on their own and teach you the foundations instead of me trying to teach you character animation. I think that wouldn't be, I could teach you what I know, but I think it would be even more effective and even better for someone who spent 8 years as a character animator to teach you that themselves. So that's why it's taken a little bit extra time, but it'll be there. We do show you though how to use motion capture animations. So maybe you don't want to know how to animate characters completely from scratch, but you might have a Rococo suit, or you could use an AI motion capture solution like Move AI, where you just need cameras, you don't need a suit. You could use that as well and get started with motion capture that way. We'll wrap up here in just a second, but yeah, we'll see. We'll just answer the last couple questions here. Alejandro, is the class self-guided or at a set time every day? So yeah, it's self-guided. All of the videos are made available. And then what we do to help you stay accountable and just make sure that you get that result in just 3 weeks is we'll send you daily checkup emails. So we'll send you reminders. We'll say, hey, this is where you should probably be at. If you missed it, here's like the biggest lessons in written form. So you get those reminders. And we're basically just giving you that repetition so that even a 4th grader could end up learning this, because we're just gonna make sure you learn something new every single day, whether you watch the videos or not, and that if you stray, it's been 3 or 4 days and you haven't made progress, that it's really easy to catch up when you have time. Maybe you have a day after work or you have time on the weekend. You could spend a lot more time all at once and just barrel through all the lessons when you have that time. But week by week, we'll make sure that you are with us, that you're making your own progress along the way. We'll do our part to make sure that you have the best chance possible there. But it is at your own pace ultimately. So some people, they get through it in like less than a week and they go crazy and they just got the time. That's awesome to see. But for most people, it's gonna take 3 weeks to get through everything there. T-Rem Elk, MLK42. Hello, Josh. I was wondering, how do you tackle the scale for all the different assets? That's a great question. The big thing I do with worrying about the scale of assets and making sure they match is I make something called an asset zoo before I build my environment. I basically take all of my assets and put them in a daylight scene, a gray shaded scene with a gray floor, and all the assets are in the middle of it. And then I will make sure that the scale work, like each object makes sense next to all the other objects. This is called an asset zoo. It's a way to preview all your assets before you go and build them. But the one trick, if you want to make sure, if you're struggling with everything in your scene looking like it's at the correct scale, like it's the scale of the real world, is to put like a 6-foot human inside of your 3D scene and just put them everywhere. If I'm building a city, put them on the top of rooftops, put them on a city street, put them at 100-meter increments throughout your entire street. You don't need to just have one. You want as many as possible so you understand how big the scene is and how much depth you're building, how tall that 6-foot human is throughout your entire shot. So use a human scale as reference. That's going to be the best way there. And then Alex Del Carpio. Yeah, we're covering Rococo and doing that. Josh, I bought it a while ago. Will I still get the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass? Yeah, this is just for people signing up now, Anon, but we do have a discount inside of Unreal Fundamentals. If you want to check that out too, if you've already checked that out, just go to Unreal for VF. It's the one-click compositing template page. If you go to the one-click compositing template page, you'll find the discount, and then you can get it for the reduced rate. But yeah, sweet. Feeding Wolves. That's awesome to see you're here. Love your stuff. You do some really awesome motion capture work. That's really cool to see. But yeah, Mark Cooper, awesome. We'll see you inside the Discord, man. And then yeah, just to wrap it up, I'll just show you what it looks like looking on the desktop so you can actually see what's inside Unreal Fundamentals. If you have any last questions, let me know, whether it's about Godzilla, whether it's about learning Unreal for the first time, whether it's about anything at all, Hollywood visual effects, let me know, we'll get those answered. And then just as a last step here, I'll show you exactly what you get when you sign up. So if you go to Unreal for VFX, you'll get Unreal Fundamentals and you'll get the Unreal to Nuke Masterclass. So I'll pop into Unreal Fundamentals here. And from here, we get the entire training. So literally 95 different videos covering every single topic, from lighting to materials, to Niagara, to rendering, to filmmaking, everything you can imagine, all the way down to create your own plane battle. So yeah, we end it with giving you your own plane. We teach you how to make films. We'll go through the cloud blueprints, how to make artist-friendly blueprints, how we can make our shots look like real Hollywood movies. And we even have an AI search engine. So this is something pretty new to the course. You can see we have the search bar at the top. this is not your average search bar. I went and like hired the best developer I could find for this, because looking through all the different menus and hunting through the documentation can be pretty tough. But let's say you want to look up volumetric fog. Like you watch the lesson and you're like, okay, yeah, but how do I enable that? You can just type in volumetric fog, and then it'll basically search through the captions of our entire video library, so you can jump directly to those time codes. So we can see here, we have a volumetric fog chapter, and I could jump to any point here. So let me just jump to 0, here. We jump in, and now we're on our volumetric fog lesson. But sometimes you might want to find a specific section of a video. So if you wanted to find something like enable path tracing, where it's a specific setting I'm looking for, I could just type in enable path tracing, and then it'll pop up and it'll show us all of these different options. So I can go through here and see how I can enable path tracing, and I can see this result here. This will enable path tracing in our scene. So I could click on this, it'll jump right to 513, it'll jump right to that time code, and I can literally see the exact answer of how I need to enable path tracing inside of my scene. So we try to design the whole thing as a resource, so you can just so you can quickly go back through the entire library. It's a lot of videos all at once, but we make it really easy to find whatever answers you're looking for. And yeah, that is the idea there. And then we have all of our bonuses at the bottom. So for all of you folks that that signed up tonight or are looking to sign up later, you can submit your assignments and you'll get a certificate at the end of it if you submit everything. We have our Dune project file. We have our one-click compositing template, which is for Nuke and After Effects. We also have our lightning fast render presets right here. And again, we're updating those every time we have something new. We have our Unreal glossary, which is full of like images and pictures to basically be the easy to use Unreal documentation. So you can jump down to any part of the documentation and get a really easy to understand answer. We have our hotkeys, cheat sheet, access to our Discord, all that fun stuff. And then obviously we have the entire video library full of a bunch of fun chapters, teaching cameras, teaching compositing, teaching path tracer, how to make your own action scenes, all this good stuff. And we even have the project file for our lightsaber battle, so you can jump right into the animation and not worry about the environments. So anyway, that is Unreal Fundamentals, and that's everything you'll get if you want to sign up this weekend. Just go to unrealforvfx.com/go. That's the best way to spot that. And cool, someone wanted to know how you made the breath for Godzilla, seeing that KGDLLC. Yes, how did I make the breath for Godzilla? So yeah, I just took images of blowing smoke. I took those, so I have that footage of blowing smoke. I got it from actionvfx.com for that specific footage. That's just a stock footage website. And then in Nuke, I put that on an image plane. So an image plane is a way for you to make a plane in 3D space in your 3D Unreal scene, but we don't have Unreal open, we have Nuke open. So it's a 3D card in 3D space, but we're gonna take our camera from Unreal. So we export our camera from Unreal, we look through that same camera inside of Nuke, we get our footage, and then we have his breath blowing out, being loud, being fierce. And then actually, let's see if I can just I'll just pull up the example here super quick, because looking at it actually makes a little bit more sense. We got it right here. All right. Yeah, this is the clip. Cool. Yeah, so this is our way to add in all of these stock footage elements, from the rain to the glowing breath to the sparks. Is we're making an image plane. We're putting that plane in 3D space. We're tracking it into the real 3D scene, and then we're using a depth pass to submerge everything in our real 3D scene. So everything that's black gets eliminated. It goes behind those buildings. And in this example, we're doing it with the sparks, but in the other examples, we can do it with blowing dust. So we could put blowing dust around his feet as he's kicking up dirt and knocking over buildings, as that's growing bigger and bigger. And then also for his breath, it's the same thing, except instead of a depth pass, I just use a position pass. So I can just mask out half of his face, half of his mouth, and then track that in so that it literally starts to look like that smoke is intersecting inside of his mouth. So that's the quick breakdown of how you combine all of them together, is tying that together. It's exporting your camera, using an image plane in Unreal, and then pulling a depth key so that you can really submerge it with your scene. Well, cool. And yet, Alex DeCarpi, oh, you're also from Montreal. That's super cool. I personally love it here in Montreal. I left for Vancouver and came back, and oh my goodness, Montreal is so much better than Vancouver. Hot take of the evening, but yeah, well, cool. And also, I'm seeing John from Watch Me Animate in the comments too. Check out his channel as well. He helped out huge. He did the animation for the crazy cool shot of him swiping away at the helicopter, and many more to come. We'll finish this up and have the finished film by next week. Can't wait to share everything all together. But yeah, you have until Sunday night to get everything together. Go to unrealforvfx.com/go if you want to get the entire bonus of the free Dune project file, the free bonus course, the free Unreal to Nuke Masterclass, the extra fully rigged plane, and the bonus chapter. You'll get all of that if you go to unrealforvfx.com/go, and you can get started for just $99 if you want to start this weekend. Also seeing here that Alejandro, you joined up. That's super cool. Thanks, man. We'll see you in the Discord as well. And cool. Yeah, and Paul, no worries. We'll definitely we'll hit you up via email in the future, and maybe there's going to be a good time. We'll find the right time for all of us. But yeah, appreciate all you guys sticking around, spending your night with me. Really appreciate it. I hope you learned something new and get a better idea of how you can start making films inside of Unreal. That to me is the most exciting thing, and I'll continue to share more and more projects just like this in the future. Break it all down so we can all get better together, much faster than just doing it on our own. And yeah, we'll see you soon enough next week. Thanks, y'all. Catch you later.